like to call to order the Monday, December 9th, Addison Central School District School Board to order. The first thing that I'd like to do is introductions, and Brian, could we start with you?
Brian Bow.
Jamie McCallum.
Ellen Wheelan-Weist.
Trisha Allen,
Steve Orzek.
Chip Malcolm.
Ellie Rump,
Barbara Wilson.
Wendy Baker.
Laura Harthan.
Mary Heather Noble.
Jason Chance. Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Thank you. And if there's in the audience any administrators, could you, or leaders, could you also introduce yourselves?
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning. Emily Woodstein, Director of Communications and Engagement.
Thank you.
We also have an online join.
And online?
Joanna Doria.
Okay, anyone else online?
No.
Okay.
30 other attendees.
And the next is, I would like a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
What I'd like to do is get a sense for how many folks would like to do public comment. On the list right now so far,
There's 8 on the list, but I feel like a lot have come in.
yes, yeah, so, and also if you're on Zoom, if you could raise your hand if you're planning to do public comment, that would be awesome. So,
you're not on Zoom, Poppy, you're okay.
that's okay.
I just heard raise my hand. And I went to school here, so
Yes.
you know, old
And the reason is typically we only have 10 minutes assigned to public comment, so I think there's enough public comment that I would like to adopt a motion to increase the time limit to 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes, and also restrict comment to 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes. And if in fact, you know, we don't get through everyone, then we'll have a second public comment period at the end.
Are you making a motion?
Yes,
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on this?
yes.
I would feel better with 30 minutes allotted at the beginning.
Okay,
There are a lot of people who are here to voice their.
okay. So, would you like to then make a motion to amend my motion?
Was that I thought,
You can do that.
okay.
But before we,
Yeah.
we have more discussion?
Yeah,
I feel like people may have prepared a 3-minute statement, so to take a third of that out would also mean that folks who might have something written as a way of expressing their feelings would have to be
Okay.
doing some live editing, which
Sure.
is very hard to do. So I would support extending the time and allowing people to keep the full 3 minutes that they may have prepared for.
okay.
Ask them to shoot for 2, but we'll cut you off at
Okay,
3.
so we have, we had a motion for it to be 20 minutes, now we amended a motion, now we have another motion on top of that.
Yeah.
That is basically 30 minutes with 3 minute
30 minutes and 3.
and
Yeah.
3. So let's, any discussion on that one?
Do we have a second on that?
Do we have a second?
Thank you,
Jamie.
Jamie.
Thank you. Jason?
30 minutes is a hard limit. We're gonna stop all public comment after 30 minutes?
And then if there's any additional after that, we would use the second public comment
At the end of the
period.
meeting.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
that we can get to our work.
Okay.
yeah. I'm trying to be really fair, make sure everyone has a chance to speak, but yet get school board business done tonight too. Yes,
The tech stuff, something is echoing and feedbacking over here that I don't know if there's a way to fix it, but
okay.
every time someone talks it makes a noise.
It's the big speaker right there in the corner.
Is that it?
The one that looks like an air filter.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend, my motion to amend, to make the time period limit 30 minutes and allow 3 minutes for comment. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And Joanna? Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure I got you. And so, any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, any abstentions? Okay, so the ayes have it. So now the motion, the amended motion is to extend, modify the agenda such that our public comment period is now 30 minutes and no limit, only 3 minutes per person on comment. All those any further discussion? Okay, let me do this right. Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so our public, it passes, our agenda has been modified to introduce an additional 20 minutes to the agenda, so it's now 30 minutes for public comment. So this is our time for public comment, and what I would like to do is just walk through some rules for making public comment. First of all, we really encourage and welcome comments from the public. And due to the large number of folks most likely wishing to speak, what I'd like to do is have legal residents of ACSD speak, as opposed to somebody that's maybe from Rutland or other areas. You have the opportunity to address the board with email. We definitely read them. So if in fact you don't reside in Addison Central School District, we will in fact get your comment. I would also like to acknowledge the emails that we have received already, and please be assured that we have received and we have read them. For tonight, what I'd like to do is basically have folks sign up on the list, a speakers list, if you haven't done so already. And I think Emily has the clipboard. And what I need you to do is print your name, please, as well as your town of residence and the topic that you would like to speak on. If you are on Zoom and you would like to speak, what I would like you to do is go into the Q&A, which is open on this webinar. And in the Q&A, you can identify your name, your town, as well as the topic as well. What I propose that we'll do is, if we have a fair amount on Zoom as well as in the room, we'll alternate back and forth between the two to make it fair. I'm trying to make it fair for everyone. And if in fact, and we will keep time as well, so that the goal is to have everyone have an opportunity. Next,
Barb,
yes.
Sorry, just quick.
Yes.
Do you want to appoint a timekeeper maybe?
Yes, Jason.
I'll be
And
fine.
Jason's gonna be our timekeeper, thank you. No one can speak until I recognize them, and when we have the clipboard, that'll make it handy, because we will, we can use the clipboard and, go back and forth. And so, between Mary Heather and Jason, I think that'll work. Each speaker, as I said before, will have 3 minutes to speak. Groups are encouraged to identify a single spokesperson if possible. If you hear a common theme, potentially you don't necessarily need to use all of your 3 minutes, kind of thing. But obviously, I know that people want to speak. Especially, with redundancy, right? You can support what someone else has said. Ceding your time to another speaker won't be allowed, so to give somebody else 6 minutes. So the max will be 3 minutes. And as you're doing your comments, please direct them to the board. And we need to remain civil at all times. And just as a reminder, public comment period is not designed to be a back and forth discussion, but rather an opportunity for board members to listen to our constituents. Public comments regarding personnel, students, or legal matters will not be heard by the board. And every speaker, when you stand up Please identify yourself by announcing your name and place of residence. Okay. Do we have the clipboard?
I have the clipboard. Are we doing comments on items not
Sure.
on the
Yeah.
agenda?
Absolutely.
So let's start first, Corey Seelover.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Corey Sulliver. Yes, that's who I am.
Do you mind giving your town?
Yes,
Thank
I do currently live in Lakeland. I previously lived in Middlebury as well as Bristol. I teach martial arts here. I coach hockey. I spend a lot of my time in Middlebury. I'm also transgender, and I want to make sure that some trans folks get to talk here. Does that sound okay?
This folks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
So you cannot stop people from being transgender. I know because I tried very hard. God, the Harvey. Okay, this is gonna take. All right, yeah.
You got this.
I tried for the first 28 years of my life very hard to convince myself that I wasn't trans. I failed. I tried everything. I prayed to God to take these feelings away from me. I tried physically hurting myself when these thoughts came up. I tried drinking a lot of alcohol. That did not work. In my mid-20s, I met a transgender person for the first time and realized that I was not the only person who felt this way. My life changed for the better immediately. Meeting this person did not turn me trans, nor would reading a book about transgender people. What meeting this person did do for me was plant the seed of an idea that maybe there was another way I could deal with the feelings I was encountering. That maybe I deserved to feel happy, and that maybe I could be out in the world as I felt comfortable. Maybe I could believe the stories my body was telling me. I'm reading a brief quote, and it says that a Trevor Project study found that 45% of queer youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, but that queer youth who found their schools to be LGBTQ affirming reported lower rates of attempting suicide. My very first memory is of telling my mother that I was a girl and her telling me that that was ridiculous. I was 4 years old and already ashamed of my own feelings. I felt confused and alone and scared. And often I wonder, what if there had been books like these in my classroom when I was a kid? What if I had known a single adult who made me feel safe to talk about what I was feeling? Maybe I could have skipped my suicide attempts. Maybe my childhood could have been filled with joy instead of shame and fear. I am happier than I have ever been since transitioning. I wonder how much easier those first 28 years of my life could have been. Banning these books will not stop children from being transgender, but they may stop them from growing up. Thank you.
Do we have anyone on Zoom that wanted to Q&A?
Are you able to see the screen from? So there are two comments, or two people who have identified, would like to comment.
Okay.
Let's start with the first one, Matt. We'll like rotate, I think is
Yeah.
what Barb was suggesting.
Margie L.
Okay, if we could bring them over. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you raise your hand, your Zoom hand as well? if you're going to talk.
Yeah,
Thank you.
got it.
Okay, Margie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Margie Latham. I live in Middlebury. And I understand that there's an attempt to ban books from the ACSD libraries, and I would like to speak against doing so. I don't think banning books is going to serve anyone's well-being, especially the well-being of people who are being discriminated against by the book ban. And I would simply ask that the board listen to the people in our LGBTQ plus community about the need for our young people to understand that there are more options than being a cisgender person. And I am a cisgender person, and my pronouns are she, he. I was born female and I still identify as female. And I think it's a travesty that in a state like Vermont, we have people trying to ban books. It's a slippery slope. I wonder what the next round of books to be banned would be requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the.
Maureen?
Hello everybody, I'm Maurice. I live in Middlebury.
Can you provide your last name, please?
Oh, sorry, Maurice Bissonnette.
Thank you.
I got a little statement here. There are not many non-binary and trans folks in the U.S. There's about 0.29% of the population that's non-binary, and about 1% is trans. There have always been non-binary and trans people. In Australia, the Aborigines have words for trans people and non-binary people, and they left Africa 70,000 years ago. They have a place in their community and words for them. This is not new. What is new is that in recent years, it has felt safe enough to show and talk about it. What is new is that we don't want any more kids to die. I'm going to cite the same thing that you just cited. 45% of kids have reported that are trans or non-binary have reported thoughts of suicide and attempts of suicide. This is one of the smallest minorities in America. In Vermont, it's about 3,000 people identifying as trans, according to the UCLA Law School study. 3,000 Vermonters out of 6,500 people. It's not a lot of people, but it's not insignificant. These are your neighbors. These are your kids. These are kids that I've worked with. This is family and friends. I want my family and friends to feel accepted in this community, and I want the children that I've worked with over the years who identify as non-binary and trans to feel like they have a place in this community. Recently, the super PAC that ran campaign ads in our most recent election, between September 1st and November 1st, spent $35 million on ads against trans people for a population that is 1% of us. Books are not going to make anyone trans or non-binary, but what a book can do is make someone feel accepted. A person or kids who may be trans or non-binary feel like they are part of this community. So books cannot make a kid trans or non-binary, but a book can save a kiddo from dying.
Okay, online, who's up next?
Caitlin from Rutland area NAACP is asking to read a statement.
The town she's in?
It's the NAACP in Rutland.
Yeah.
Perhaps have them wait
Yeah.
until after
Can,
legal residents come.
yeah, we'll have if there's time, we can allow you to speak. If there isn't time, then you can definitely email your statement.
Can we verify what town she lives in?
Yeah.
Rutland.
She's in Rutland.
No, she represents the Rutland NAACP.
Oh, gotcha.
What town is Caitlin in?
She lives in Leicester. Leicester. She lives in
Yeah.
Leicester.
Caitlin's Lester and everything.
It's not ACSD, so we'll come back, right? I want to give people that are in ACSD district first opportunity. So in the room,
Wilson?
Hi. Good evening. My name's Sheena Wilson. I'm from Middlebury. Sorry, I didn't expect this to be so emotional. I'm so sorry that you guys had to go through what you guys had to go through. It's totally not my experience, but it's upsetting. Okay. I'm from North Texas. That's where I raised my 2 older adult children. And now my 7-year-old, excuse me, she aged a year, is now thriving at Mary Hogan. Growing up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and later raising my own children there, I witnessed a disturbing trend of censorship and religious influence creeping into the Texas education system. This ranged from the State Board of Education refusing textbooks that included evolution to the banning of thousands of books that were deemed inappropriate, many of which dealt with race, sexuality, and history from the perspectives of women, people of color, and LGBTQ+ authors. Titles like Bodies Are Cool, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, and Sparkle Boy were among those targeted. And they're being targeted here. Most recently, the Texas School Board of Education approved an incentive-based Bible curriculum, essentially bribing elementary schools with additional funding to adopt the curriculum. This raises serious concerns about separation of church and state and the potential of religious indoctrination. And I do not want Vermont to become Texas. I did not move here to do this. And I believe this trend of censorship is incredibly harmful. Banning books limits students' perspectives to diverse perspectives and sends a dangerous message about whose stories and experiences are considered valid. If we allow one book to be banned, we open the door for widespread censorship and the potential for a single ideology to dominate our educational system. Vermont has the 5th best public schools in the nation. We should be proud of that. Vermont ranks 8th for quality, having the lowest pupil to teacher ratio in the country, allowing teachers to give students extra attention. The average teacher to ratio in the United States is 16:1, while Vermont is 13:1. Vermont also ranks 4th for safety, tied to 1st with Massachusetts and Oklahoma for having the lowest percentage of threatened or injured high school students. Texas sits 40th when ranking against its other states, and it has a 20:1 ratio for student to teacher. And let's not all forget Uvalde. This meeting is a call to action. We must remain vigilant and ensure that our schools remain a safe space where all students feel welcome, respected, and empowered to learn and grow. I am grateful that my child is now a part of the Middlebury community where intellectual freedom and diversity are cherished.
I'm sorry, can you finish? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to say that, we can be frustrated at a small group of parents, but they don't have a big voice if we keep showing up like this.
Thank you. And on Zoom?
Still just
It's
still
still
the two
just the
folks
2
from
folks
Lester.
outside.
Okay.
Something else with their hand raised, but she hasn't put in the.
Grace.
Grace is
if you're-
Middlebury.
Oh, yeah, she
Okay.
is from Middlebury.
Do we want to bring Grace over then?
Yeah.
Grace, if you can hear us, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I would just like to echo what's been said already by
Grace,
different
can you give
members
us
of
your full name and your town of residence, please?
Sorry, my name is Grace Vining, and I'm from Middlebury. I'm at college right now because I graduated from MMHS in 2022. But when I heard about what was going on, I really wanted to join the school board meeting, and I'm really grateful that there's the Zoom option so that people can still be like in touch with what's going on. I was really, really upset to hear that these kids' books are being there's an attempt to ban them, especially because all of the things that these books do are just to tell kids that their experiences are valid and that thinking about and being curious towards their bodies and their identities and the way that they express themselves is encouraged. And I'll be quick just because I know that like a lot of other people have talked and everything like that. But I just want to echo what everyone else said, and that it's really, really important that we stand for all members of our community, and that books are a way that people see themselves, and books are a way that people know that they exist. And I think it would be really, really, really harmful to ban something just because we don't understand it or because we think of it as something that is dangerous, when in fact it's much more dangerous to tell someone that they shouldn't exist in the body and identity that is theirs. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Mayer. I'm a retired pediatrician in Middlebury. I've spent almost 50 years of my life advocating for children, and I want to address the question of book bans. I want to start by just noting that the most banned book in the United States is, ironically, 1984 by George Orwell. And I think that should in some way. A couple of arguments against banning any books in schools are it limits learning. Books are a vital part of education, and banning them limits students' abilities to learn and grow. It undermines critical thinking, restricting information and discouraging free thought. It undermines one of the primary functions of education, which is teaching students how to think for themselves. It endangers tolerance. Banning books endangers endangers tolerance, free expression, and democracy. It helps books and reading help children to understand the world. It helps them to understand the world in all its complexity. It's not a simple world, but books help them to understand. Reading encourages empathy. It encourages social and emotional development. Parents can make their decisions about their own children, but they should not be able to make decisions about other people's kids and about an entire school system. Books reflect students who are in the state, in Vermont. Students deserve to see themselves reflected in the books that are available to them. And finally, there's the danger of erasing LGBTQ+ people and their experiences from literature that creates a sense of otherness. And I think that sense of otherness is a really is a dangerous place to go, because it starts to demonize children, which I think we can all agree is not something we want to do. I think also censorship violates the First Amendment right to free speech and our constitutional responsibility to our children's education. So I hope that will be taken into account in your deliberations. Thank you.
I'm Poppy Reese. I live in Middlebury. I went to school in Middlebury, and one of my kids is still in the high school, and the other graduated from here. I've been an educator most of my life, And right now I'm the Director of Religious Exploration at the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society here in Middlebury, where I oversee programs for children and youth. And my UU faith calls me to fight for inclusion and equity, to work toward beloved community, which is the idea that we could have a community and world where everybody is getting what they need, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of and dreamed of. I want to say something about the power of books. I really support what people have said about the idea that it's very important to get to see yourself in places so that you don't just feel like you're the only one or that you need to hide who you are. Besides books supporting, besides the books that we're talking about, but a lot of books supporting people in the LGBTQIA+ community, they support the way we grow kids. So the books benefit the entire Mary Hogan population of kids and teachers and parents, and they do in all libraries, because it is helping to raise kids who are not just, who don't just think that white, cis, heterosexual, able-bodied, middle-class people are the people who live in the world. And I have been really moved that my kids started coming home from our schools here. Not Mary Hogan, because they didn't, well, I guess they did go there, but that was a long time ago. But I mean, started coming home from mums and high school, pointing out to me when I used language that wasn't inclusive, or when I forgot to remember who was in the room, not make assumptions about who somebody is because of how they look, or all kinds of other things. The kids at the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society are naturally so much more inclusive than I was, than my friends were when we were young. So helping to keep books like this in our libraries helps try to grow kids who will not tease, bully, hurt, kill, and legislate against people who aren't the same identity as them or don't fit into some special identity that they think is right or best. And the last thing that I want to say is that, yeah.
Can I have you
Sure.
finish?
Yeah. I just wanted to point out that Sparkle Boy is not even about gender. It is simply about a boy wearing a dress. So that's what's starting to creep into this. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mary Slosar from Woodbridge Zone.
Okay, we'll go with the Zoom and then come back to the room. Mary, Solsar, we're bringing you in.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
New Branch. I first wanted to take a minute to just applaud everybody who showed
Mary,
up
can you,
tonight and for all of the...
Introduce yourself.
She did.
She did, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We'll start the
Thanks.
time again.
I just wanted to start by applauding everyone for all of the organizing and showing up around this issue. It's just inspiring to see our community come together this way and showing up for this meeting, particularly on a snowy night. So just kudos to everybody in the room and on Zoom and others who have commented on this issue in other fora. I also wanted to, rather than reinforce many of the important comments that have been shared already around the importance of books and helping people feel seen and feel validated, and also helping other children open up their minds to the diversity amongst us. That's all really important, and I think that's been articulated well already. I wanted to call attention though to the to see what the board can do in the situation and what administration can do in this situation. So I would hope that today we're going to hear from administration about how they're going to follow the procedures already spelled out that are associated with policy D22, potentially D23 as well. So I think it'd be important to hear how that process moves forward. And from the board, I think it would be important for you to look back at policy D22 and D23 to think about ways to specifically call out topics relating to equity and to diversity in our population, and those should be documented as priority areas in addition to literacy, global citizenship, artistic expression, etc. So I just wanted to call out those potential actions and information that people in the room can take today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle Boyce.
Hi, I'm Danielle Boyce. I live in Middlebury. I hope you'll forgive me. I thought I was just signing in. But I promised my child that if I had an opportunity to speak, I would. I'm humbled to be able to say that we're well on our way to raising a really inclusive and kind person. And something that I don't know has been completely articulated yet. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just repeating the very true and real experiences of those who are in the LGBTQ community, is really just the other side as well, with our children who maybe haven't had any experience with anybody in the community which is being targeted right now. And I think it's just really important that we expose them to other voices and experiences for them to be able to think about and learn about and become just better citizens of our society. Thank you.
fire red hair and loves to walk around Middlebury and makes friends with everyone. So good to see a lot of familiar faces. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. We've lived in the ACSD community for 3 years. And we actually decided to move here to find a new community to live in while giving public comment at a school board meeting in our old school district, where a school board member and a local elected official said that our family was perverse and didn't belong there because we were a weird family. And we were elated when we were able to find a house in Middlebury because we were really wanting to send our kids specifically to Mary Hogan as opposed to other ACSD schools, no offense, but we were excited to be in a bigger school that would have extracurricular activities, but also hopefully be a little bit more welcoming than where we were coming from, which was another Vermont school district, so not very far. Yeah, I'm not going to reiterate what a lot of other people have said, but I'll just say that my family knows the books on this list extremely well. We read them sometimes daily. If you've ever had a toddler, you know that they just want the same book over and over again. But most importantly, whenever our family enters a classroom, a daycare, interacts with a new institution, we actually gift the adults who run that space several of the books on this list because they are backed by early childhood educators, they're backed by pediatricians, they're backed by child psychologists. They're truly the best tools to teach kids about the experiences of other humans who happen to have gender diverse experience, who happen to be trans. who happen to come from queer families, all of which those things exist in my small little home on Stonegate Drive. So we know these books super well. We would be entering Mary Hogan in a year or two. We would be gifting these books to the administrators. So hopefully they're not banned because we probably do too anyway. But yeah, I just want to say that like these books have already created space for families like mine and space for kids like mine. My toddler's gender diverse. My teen's a questioning teen. And that's just in the last 3 years in this small, tiny community in Addison County. So we're here, we're real people, trans people, gender diverse toddlers, queer teens, and these books have already worked to make a world of a difference for us right here. So, yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you. It's 30 minutes total. So I know there's probably many others that would like to comment, and we really can't take up the whole board meeting. I would offer, we have a second public comment period. That'll be once we get through the business part of the agenda. And please feel free to send us email and provide us your comments. We definitely, welcome them. And, thank you for coming out and speaking them to us tonight.
Can you explain the next meeting? In the paper it said there'd be a second meeting with this issue.
Our board meeting, the next board meeting is next Monday. It's a regular board meeting.
I think she means procedurally what's going to happen.
Do you mind if I
Sure.
take that one? Yeah, so I really want to commend the journalism from the Addison Independent today. For those of you that have access, they've done a really nice job in suggesting the process that comes about when a challenge to an instructional materials, which are, those have been in place for decades, right? Those come along from time to time. They're not abnormal. When those take place, there's a process we follow that's in policy. So that process right now, as they've described it, sits with me. There's no timeline on the superintendent's appeal, and my guess is that I won't have finished looking into the 8-page report that I was provided until we'll be into January, given that the holiday is coming. So there's not an imminent decision that's going to come out of the superintendent's office, until that time. The appeal process involves talking with the parents that have made the request and working through what the challenges are from their perspective, as well as the committee's recommendations and where we are relative to policy. So at that time, I'll make a recommendation and the parent will be notified of that recommendation. If they don't agree with the recommendation, then they're able to appeal my recommendation to the school board. At that time, the school board would hear the matter, and that would be done in open session. That I won't complete my end until at least probably beginning to mid-January, given the timing of where we are and the need to make sure that we do things well. In that sense. So I hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
One other thing I might say to folks who are likely interested in this topic is that, our school employees are terrifically valued. And we have internal conversations about ways in which the district can protect employees from really challenging public comment. We're all public servants, any of us, whether we are public teachers, public educators, public officials like policemen and firemen and women and so on and so forth, and that can be a very, very difficult role to play in society from time to time. Our conversations about how the district can take actions that will protect employees will be internal conversations. We have some steps that we have taken, and we will be soliciting additional steps and working with our association to do that. So I think that's important for the public to know, even though the ins and outs of those steps may not be something that are appropriate for public comment, and I just want to make sure that this interested group has a chance to hear that information.
Clarifying question?
You can send an email, okay? This isn't a back and forth, I'm so sorry. No.
May I briefly make a clarifying statement? That the board could potentially sit in judgment on this case.
Yes, and that's what Wendy said.
Therefore, if a board member does not respond to you, if you send them a personal email, it may be with the intention of staying neutral until the case is resolved.
Right.
We're not ignoring you, and we are certainly not uninterested in this topic, and we certainly have some passions about it, but it would be inappropriate for us to express those before a hearing came before this board.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we're gonna move on. Next up on the agenda is the recommendation to approve the minutes from our November 25th meeting. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I am going to indicate that the minutes are approved as submitted and warned. Next is approving the ACSD bills, and Chip, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Jason and I read the bills today. There were two payrolls, one for $747,565.64, and the second payroll was for $324,501.54. The general fund was $923,794.31. As I often do, I'll clarify that of that 923,000, 500, almost 600,000 was related to healthcare costs, and 139,000 were expenses paid in the second installment for the preschool, to the vendors in the district. So just to point out how much we spend on healthcare every minute. So I make a motion to approve the bills as read.
A second? Okay, thank you, Jason. Any questions, comments? Okay, the bills are approved as read by Chip. Next, we do not have our student representatives here, I don't believe. So we'll move on to report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Barb. We have lots of good information for the board to consider tonight. The only action under personnel appointments and resignation is the resignation of Nicole Carter, who's the assistant superintendent. Her resignation letter was provided to you. She's leaving her position with us in order to be able to attend to family matters, and we wish her well in that respect. I think that John is busy putting together a profile of the contributions that Nicole's made in her time and as assistant superintendent, and we're appreciative of her efforts very much. So I want to go ahead and put that before you.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the resignation of Nicole Carter?
I move to accept the resignation of Nicole Carter.
A second?
I'll second begrudgingly.
With regrets?
With regrets.
Yeah, okay. Any comments, questions? Okay.
If we wanted to like pass on a note and get it to Nicole, could we drop it off at the central office? And
You could.
pass it
Yep,
on?
that'd be fine.
Great. Thank you for that, Jason. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the resignation of Nicole Carter, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And I saw you too, Joanna, thank you. And any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, we had one abstention, yes, thank you. Okay, it's been approved.
So the bulk of the superintendent's report tonight is financial. We have Matt Carente here in person tonight, which is really quite wonderful. He's a new dad, so congratulations to Matt relative to that. We have managed to continue on the budget train, and Matt has an update for us relative to the work that our school-based administrators and program directors have been doing to put together where we are in terms of our expenditures. It will connect to the other things that you've seen already as a board relative to the equity-based budgeting approach that we're taking. And we will also be sharing with you some strategy areas that we are looking at in order to be able to help us to meet the 2% growth target that you asked us to draft towards. So these are general areas, and we want to just check in with you around them and update you on our progress so far. So I'll turn it over to Matt from here.
Can I just make one
Sure.
comment too, that
Definitely.
in this process, the finance committee has met frequently and usually have seen these slides and or the presentation each time, and we will have another one next time, so that they have been sort of vetted, if that's the word, through those, and suggestions were made in order to maybe improve it or whatever. So we've certainly been involved with that up to this point, and Matt's done a great job having to be a father again. Not that he's not now, but having to juggle all of this at the same time. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chip.
Thank you. The clicker around over there. Happy to drive from here, but sitting right there. Okay. That's fine. Just do it from here. I'll get it. I'm feeling inspired by a slide. Or if we just need a break. So this is the third budget development presentation that I've given. The first one that preceded these three was the budget drivers. And first we talked about the conditions in the landscape around the financial planning this year, and now we've started building towards what that plan is going to be. As Dr. Baker said last time, we set a 2% growth target for the education spending. And so this presentation builds off of that target and works in two areas. The first is to look at reduction strategies, which can be used to offset some of the new money that we are projecting needing to spend due to major drivers such as healthcare and increases in labor cost. We have about $3 million of new costs estimated for next year, and in order to fit that into a 2% package, reduction strategies are required. So we tried to outline a menu of equivalent options that are available to us as we're designing this spending plan. The second part of the presentation is a foundational forecast, and by that we're going to introduce this stacking style of budgeting and go through some of the building blocks and how things are starting to come together in a preliminary way. Okay. So jumping right into the strategies for trimming the budget in anticipation of the spending goals. We have our ESSER funded positions. And as you all recall, these are positions that were funded either 1 year or more using the ESSER COVID relief grants, which were federal grants designed to assist the schools in recovery from the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic. Last year, in our FY25 spending plan, we kind of held the line on these positions, knowing that there was a new strategic plan coming into being, knowing that there was a new superintendency beginning, and knowing that the time to sort of reconcile the future of these positions would be for the FY26 budget. in looking towards that spending plan, we have identified some positions which are sort of targeted as able to be reduced within this sector. These positions, as you can see here, are for interventionist positions, with the breakout there: one literacy interventionist at the high school, math interventionist at the high school, and then two K-5 intervention positions, one of which is vacant, as is the math position at the high school. So those are two of those four are currently vacant. We also have two behavioral interventionist positions and one Aspire coordinator, sometimes also in the past referred to as a WLC coordinator at the high school. In each one of these slides, you're going to see a similar format, which is the total cut amount and then the equivalent cost per pupil. At the building of this presentation, we didn't have the long-term weighted average daily membership figure yet. And so this is just the current enrollment. We use a fixed 1,650 or 1,650 as a pupil count, just to make sure that we kind of had a small number to help study the quantity of each strategy.
It might be helpful at this stage just to remind the board that while this is going on, there's also a process that is building our spending, where we're taking all the furniture out of the house, putting it on the lawn, and then determining what needs to go back in the house. So in doing so, we may very well have interventionists, we may very well have behavioral interventionists, and we may shift our resources in order to be able to do that. This is sunsetting a strategy that related to a very specific grant in a very specific way.
Yes, thank you. So the next strategy that we're talking about tonight is surplus reduction. What this means is sort of looking at FY24's budget performance to note areas where the lines in the budget were underspent or not spent at all. You know, the budget is a spending plan. It's the best laid plans that we have at the time, and sometimes over the course of a year, money sits there and doesn't wind up getting used the way we think it's going to. And so we go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that anything that's stagnant or underutilized is reduced accordingly, while also realizing that some of those lines represent measures of contingency against unforeseen expenses, and that that the right measure of caution contingency needs to stay in there. And so that has a $225,000 price tag on that one. We'll summarize all these at the end, so don't have to remember them all. Next, we're looking at facilities construction funds. So these they came from two different sources. We had a $185,000 construction fund, which was sort of held as this middle contingency for the repair or replacement of a larger scale piece of machinery at one of the school buildings. I kind of thought of it as the boiler fund, which is sort of ironic because we're replacing a boiler right now and proposing to reduce this line. The other one was $200,000, and that was put into the FY25 spending plan to help bridge the gap between ESSER funding for the Mary Hogan HVAC position and the actual cost of that project. And so that was one-time money, went in 25, coming out in 26. Some of the 185 on the original line stays in to help bolster repair and maintenance, so that we are maintaining our capacity to keep the buildings in good working order. Our next reduction strategy is looking at healthcare. This is kind of similar to surplus reduction, but it's a variable expense that's prone to changing year to year based on individual employee selections. Employees who are not enrolled in any of the healthcare plans through the district, perhaps they have coverage through a spouse or partner, and can elect to receive a cash in lieu payment of about $1,500 instead of receiving health care benefits from ACSD. So that would cost us $1,500 for that plan. Another employee occupying perhaps the same position could choose a family plan, and that would cost the district $35,000. And so there's a huge variance in the choices that employees make and the subsequent costs to the budget. How to plan for that? Well, we sort of aim for the middle and try to make sure that we maintain enough capacity to, absorb a new hire and be able to fit them into the budget, whatever their selection may be. That said, there is some capacity, I think, to tighten up here, and that would be a $300,000 reduction in that realm. The next strategy is looking at some of the general ed paraprofessional positions. So I think, as we've talked about in some of the earlier presentations, we have some stubborn, hard to fill para positions at various schools around the district. So the strategy is to look at reducing these with an eye towards two things. There's obviously savings there and reclaiming those funds to help the bottom line. There's also this idea that if something's vacant and unable to be filled, that a better way might be possible. And so by sort of moving that out onto the lawn, as Dr. Baker said, there might be a better way to arrange things when they come back in. And so that's part of the work that we'll get to later. There's a variance here, 5 to 10 FTEs were identified, and so we've presented that as a range. I think in the original budget drivers presentation, we talked about student services streamlining as one of these meta budgeting principles to help strengthen growth instruction, identify inequity, and streamline student services. This work is ongoing. It's obviously something that has been under development with Nicole while she was here, and now the work is continuing to move forward in her absence. The major strategies involved in streamlining student services involve looking at student to teacher ratio for special education caseload systems that will basically give us an equivalent to class size, and to say, how can we ensure that there's the right density of student to teacher in special education in the same way that we're ensuring that density in classroom instruction. Special education is obviously tailored to individual need, and so caseload is not necessarily student count or case count, and we're working on how we can develop a good metric that allows the correct balance of caseload for all of our special educators. We also are looking to consolidate personnel and facilities costs at the ACP programs. One of our 3-year leases at the Vermont Sun facility expires, and so we have an option to reduce the cost of that rent. It's about $65,000 a year. And then we have some pandemic-based behavioral specialists and consultant positions that we're also looking at reducing. These didn't hit the ESSER funding stream, but they were sort of born from the pandemic in the same way, where the positions did not exist prior to the pandemic, came out of this spike in need to address behavioral issues, and now are sort of being reevaluated in the what's called sort of the recovery era post-pandemic.
Matt?
Yes, Jamie.
Thanks, Matt. What does the word consolidate mean on this slide? Like, what happens to personnel when we consolidate them?
I can answer that. I mean, I think what our team is looking at now are ways in which our alternative programming is duplicating efforts in some places, could be combined in order to make more efficient and effective programming for students. It seems as though some of the programming that has developed in Addison Central over the past few years has been kind of a pilot, some of it beginning as a consortium where we now solely hold those contracts of those
Right,
programs. And so it's really thinking about what that looks like. In terms of what happens to the staff, I mean, there are administrative staff, and then there are also specializing staff. There are social workers and special educators and so on and so forth. Most of those positions we actually have vacancies for in other areas of our programming. So again, we may end up not necessarily losing people. We're just consolidating what they're doing so that we're making better use of our resources.
Got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
those are set up to be 3 school district programs, everything from the facilities to the architecture of the staff. And so in the absence of that 3 district participation, the consolidation is integration and optimization of matching resource to need.
Thank you.
This slide summarizes all of the strategies that we just discussed, and as you can see on the bottom total there, we have sort of exceeded the $2 million mark if all of those things were realized. There's a little bit of a give and take. Not everything that we listed as a strategy today would need to be realized to meet the feasibility target that the board set, but some of the things that we discussed today as far as reduction strategies might be used to offset new investment strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea that there's a give and take or a rearrangement, and that in a closed system where there's not a lot of new money coming in, the idea is changes manifest as an internal shift, from A to B. And so some of that will create an effect of reduction and of creation at the same time. That'll kind of cancel each other out.
The student success measures that we have across the district are what the building leaders and the program directors are looking at very closely. Those relate to the strategic plan, and they actually go beyond just the VTCAP data, but what might back up the VTCAP data. And so they've submitted all of their planning documents that say, here's where our kids are, here's where we think we can get them in this next year, and here's what we think we would need in order to do that. And I think for many of them, it really represents the first time that they've really been able to think that way post-pandemic. And so it's an exciting time for the district in that respect. And the new investment strategies, are now what Matt and I are taking from the good work of our leaders and putting together into some of the other buckets that Matt will show you that have placeholders in them right now. So exciting work to come.
Ellen, just to make sure I'm following and to put a fine point on it, this is the menu of options for reduction strategies. We don't know what our reduction target goal is yet, partly because we don't know where we're going to want to increase certain investments in other areas. So these are on the table, but we don't know how much or which of these we're going to want to engage with for the actual budget development as more information comes in. Okay.
So that we're here at the halfway mark. The next sort of a piece of this presentation, we're going to look at building and building using what we're calling foundational cost forecasting. So we have this thing that we call the stack, and it sort of is a graphic representation of different chunks of the budget, all of which sort of sum to our total plan. In the first part of the stack, we have block 1. We gave them all numbers from block 1 to block 7. This involves operations expenses, so these are sort of the keep the lights on pieces of the budget, which do not have a lot of major variance on a year-to-year basis, which sort of are mandatory requirements for any spending plan that we're going to put together. Block 2 is similarly, mandatory. It is we send kids to the Career Center, and we pay universal pre-K tuition, and so that does form Block 2. Block 3 is our biggest block, and this is where we have the salary and benefits of the mandatory teachers, administrators, nurses, counselors, general paraeducators, admin assistants. These are based strongly on enrollment, also based on both board policy, for example, class size, as well as the duty of care, the idea that we need to make sure that every school has somebody to answer the phone at all times and to provide medical care every day that there are students there. And so some of the staffing decisions are in this block, but they're not purely a factor of enrollment. We've wrestled a little bit with where to put the district administration and fiscal services budget. As of a few hours ago, we moved them back into Block 1. And so when we meet next, we'll make that change. But for now, we're sort of thinking of them as Block 3, which is why that's there. Block 4 is sort of the non-personnel side of Block 3. So all of the supplies, materials, purchased services, contract services, and what's the other thing? Subscriptions, software, things like that, that augment the personnel, salary, and benefits that are in Block 3. So all of the employees in 3, all of the non-employees in 4. Block 5 is student services. So this is where everything that is legally tied to an IEP lives and is governed by the rules of special education. Block 6, we're calling student opportunity funds. So this is a group of expense category or expenses that does not live in any of the other blocks, but it does help enrich the learning at ACSD. It could be everything from the $25 per student field trip fund that we do or have done for the last couple of years to a set fee for attending the Keewaydin camp as a 5th grader district-wide. It could be sports and all of our extracurriculars, given the fact that technically none of those things, activities and sports, do not meet the criteria to exist in any of the other blocks and represent an opportunity for enrichment at ACSD. I think sometimes we think of them as a little bit more integral or foundational, mandatory, but if you think about it, they're really Block 6. And then Block 7 is our last one, and this is one of the newest ones. It's the sort of driver of the strategic plan as its implementation. It's the financial arm of implementation, and it represents the investments that we identify and target towards creating equity or addressing inequity as we've spotted it within the district. This is driven largely by the triangle plans that the principals have been working on and directors, and represents their vision towards targeting these equity investments, identifying the data to address whether or not those targeted investments work, and then creating a feedback development cycle that says, oh, all right, well, we did this thing, it worked great, so let's do it again. It didn't work, so let's not do it again, or we're not sure if it worked yet, but here's the data, and we're going to give it another year. So those kind of hang out at the top here, and as you can see on the left, we went from 0 all the way up to about $51 million, sort of like the fill the thermometer at the co-op. We filled it all the way up by Block 7.
Matt, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The equity investment, are we going to get into each one of these? Yes.
Just a few of them today.
Okay, so maybe I'll hold my question till later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ones that we're going to talk about today are the easy ones, and then we're going to...
Oh!
Next time we meet, we're going to talk about Block 3, which is the biggest one, but also sort of governed by some of the most logic-based rules. And then the first meeting in January, we're gonna talk about student services, equity, and student opportunity funds as we move up towards the top. So it's really like a bottom to top build out here. These charts track the stack model sort of in a little bit more of a scaled way. You can see here I put a little slice on the top which identifies that $937,000. That's that 2% target of new money. There's a lot of flux going on right now though in terms of the long-term weighted average daily membership, the unaudited fund balance, and the property yield. And so we're not really considering that 937 as extra money to add yet, but we're just identifying that it's there and we can still meet the feasibility target using it. You're going to see things fill up, and we've taken it out of the subsequent slides, but just know that it's there when we need it. So debt is our easiest, friendliest piece of the entire budget. We had one piece of debt. We have a very small debt load of about $172,000. One of those loans reached maturity and comes out of the budget, and so we spend 30% less on debt in FY26. Great news. Transportation is contractually scheduled to go up. We have the last year of our 3-year deal with Betcha. 4.5% plus some increasing surcharge expenses gives us a 4.8% projection there. You can see on each one of these there's also a price tag at the bottom that's using that same 1650 pupil count to again sort of track the magnitude of each of these things. So we can track cuts and we can track additions in the same way. The tech budget is projected to dip a little bit. We're using some reductions in hardware and supply lines in order to offset some of the salary and benefit growth, and projecting a small decline in tech budget. Facilities has sort of some movement in both directions. So as I said earlier, we have that construction services reduction happening. We did move 100 of it into repair and maintenance. We've also taken a reduction in equipment and landscaping lines, largely based on usage in '24. We are seeing the need to increase utilities and communications as rates go up. And then salary and benefits, this is where we have all of our custodial staff, and so there's a pretty sizable impact whenever we have a big salary and benefits year on the bottom line for facilities. I'm going to stop after this one for questions on block 1, but we'll go through food service. Food service has traditionally not been considered a cost center in the ACSD budget. It's been only a few years since we started our own food service program, and so there's been this sort of growth or maturity of the program as it finds its way. But it's also complicated because food service is its own fund. It draws revenue from federal sources, state sources, and whatever doesn't get matched by reimbursement revenue exists as a general fund expense. And so sometimes it's hard to predict it in the same way that we would create a different budgeted cost center. But what we've seen is that based on changes to labor within the food service department and the increase in food prices, food costs, that we're hitting the bottom line of the budget for closer to 300 than the 100,000 that we had originally planned for, and so we're planning to recalibrate this number to reflect that change. That for reference, that staff wage increase was largely caused by the side letter that we did to the support staff last year, where we removed 2 steps from the support staff agreement plus added $1 to everybody because food service is non-union. We wanted to extend some measure of the same relief. It was an inflation relief side letter. We wanted to extend some measure of the same relief, but didn't have the means to do that in a negotiated way. So we just gave everybody the dollar raise. It was a parallel process to that that support staff side letter, largely contributed to that increase in labor.
Matt?
Yep.
And food services, since a large portion comes from the state because of the requirement to provide breakfast, lunch, do they increase provide cost of living increase with that money? Do they
change the reimbursement amount?
Yeah, each year based on, or is it pretty much? Or are we just making up the difference in the general fund at this point?
Yes, it's more of the latter.
Yeah, that's what
think,
I feared.
Idea that I think universal meals is sort of politically fragile in terms of a piece of the ed fund that the governor never supported, and probably doesn't. I don't think there's a lot of appetite to grow its cost to the state. Probably looking at something similar at the federal level, and so I think that with lawmakers or government program people a little gun shy about pumping as much money as is needed into it, it's going to be a little bit of a shared cost.
Yeah.
It also reflects, I think, our commitment to not exclusively running, a commodity food service program, and to running what's, in my estimation, a very, well-run and excellent program. So there's a quality factor in there too. Okay, so that's all block one for now. And like I said earlier, we're going to bring some other things in there. So for the next time, we'll look at a block 1 2.0. But for now, we're looking at about $8 million of the budget spoken for in that first piece of the stack. The next stack, block 2, is tuition. And so we pay tuition to the Career Center based on 6-semester rolling average of enrollment, 3 years of enrollment, times the annual tuition rate. We're expecting our enrollment next year to be similar to this year, between 50 and 60. And because that's stable and because it's a 6-semester average, we don't expect to see a major spike up or down in enrollment. And so the only factor that's going to really drive what our tuition cost is whatever the Career Center comes up with as their rate. We have heard through various channels that 10% is sort of a benchmark that they have been putting forth as where their budget's starting to come in. And so we've used that as our forecast. We are waiting for their actual rate to be announced so that we can solidify this, but for now that's where the projection stands. We also pay tuition to universal pre-K providers, and so the rate in FY25 was $3,800. We just received the 26 rate. It's similar. It might be $3,900 and change, but it didn't move a ton. However many students from ACSD who are residents of the district go to each program, we send out a tuition payment to that program on behalf of that kid. We estimate 115 to 125 ACSD 3, 4, and 5-year-olds next year, and that small increase in tuition rate. We're also budgeting for integrating 0.3 of our UPK coordinator salary and benefits, which is all we pay. We split that position with Mount Abe and Addison Northwest. And so our portion of that salary and benefits will live now in the UPK budget. It had previously been a piece of the student services budget. So that's a quicker one. That adds another $2.3 million, and now we're starting to fill the stack up. We have block 1 and block 2. 40 million left. Block 3 is written in this obnoxious and hard to read white on white because it's not done yet. And we didn't want anyone to be able to see it. So, if you can parse that out, it says that it's pending, and that's really the work that's happening behind the scenes right now, taking the principal generated triangle plans which have been submitted and piecing them all together to determine what's going to land in block 3, what's going to land in block 6 and block 7, and how we're going to make all those triangles meld with each other. So under development, and you can see the FY25 figure is there. Under development, again, this administration one will move to block 1, so don't worry about that. And then direct instruction. So to give an idea, between the 23.8 million in direct instruction and the 776,000 in PD, we're looking at 24.5 million in FY25 in salary and benefits to our sort of educational direct instruction personnel. That was roughed out here just to give an idea of the scale of that block relative to the others. Obviously the final figure is pending. The next block we have is block 4, and this is non-personnel costs. Just to reiterate that those district ones will wind up moving down into block 1. But for now, we have looked at 3 major categories within non-personnel costs. We have supplies, so stuff, everything from markers and colored pencils to software could be considered a general supply. Band-aids, food is a direct as a supply, and other things. Professional services are any instances where we are contracting with a third-party provider. That could be for translation and interpretation services. It could be for OT and PT, although those would generally be in the special ed.
SRO.
What's that?
SRO.
SRO, contract with the town of Middlebury to provide a school resource officer. It could be a contract with a piano tuner to come tune the piano. There's a lot of different things where we bring in a third-party provider, and that's what professional services is. Within district administration, while we have it here, we might as well talk about it. Professional services would be our contract with our insurance provider. Eats up a lot of that one. Legal and other things like consultants for the board training, those kind of things live in there. Other, in district administration, 450,000 of other is the contingency fund that we hold. Is sort of that last piece of unbudgeted expense for the unknown. Other could also be things like dues and fees to organizations, indirect instruction, travel expenses, things like that. The sum of all that is about 2.7 million. We're moving about one of those out, so 1.7 million would be the amount of block 4 that you're going to see moving forward, but for now we'll look at it as 2.7, and you can see that there, which leaves us about $12.5 million to go after block 4. So blocks 5, 6, and 7 are going to be part 2, along with block 3, as we said earlier. Here's where we're at if we were to sort of summarize everything that we talked about today. We have put those blocks in 1, 2, and 3. We have 3 under construction and will be part of the next budget presentation. And then 6, 7, and 8 will be presented to you all in January. And then I just have that as a reference slide. But that's the end of the stack model presentation for today. And be happy to do questions if anyone has them. Sit down.
Steve?
I saved my questions to the end. I have some questions about.
Let me know if you want me to go back to a slide.
Okay, I don't know if we need to, and you were talking about the ESSER positions, when you were talking about the savings, it's one of the first slides, that you were looking at. You have 4 interventionists, 2 behavioralists, and 1 Aspire coordinator. You have it estimated at 620,000, and I thought we estimate usually 100,000 per employee. Are those actual costs for?
Good point. So the yeah, this ties to the work that was going on behind the scenes with Nicole. We had sort of set that as a goal because the student services budget had gone up by about that much in FY25, like above where the approved budget was based on some of the new costs.
I think you're talking about the ESSER positions though, right?
Yes,
That's your
these
question?
specifically.
Yeah, I think where Matt's headed is that the behavior interventionists are support staff positions, so
I see.
those are a little bit
A
less.
little bit less.
So those are actual costs of those positions right now, if they are filled.
Okay.
If they're not filled, then they're estimates of what it would take to fill them.
And this may speak, I mean, I may as well lay it out here on the table. As I was looking through these cost reductions, you are not identifying the schools where these cuts are coming from. When you say things like general ed paras, which are not filled, surplus reductions of positions that have not been filled, those sound like Mary Hogan.
They're actually across the district, and that's a level of detail that you'll see at the first meeting in January. So as we're continuing to build that, you know, those pieces are being filled in, and so you'll see all that. The principals will take a look at all of that at their second meeting in December. So, you know, December 19th, they'll be able to look at kind of stacks across schools, so you'll be able to see exactly where those vacancies come from and what that looks like.
So more detail is coming.
Correct.
And it will identify which schools are taking the hits.
Correct. It will
Okay.
identify schools that are making changes either in relationship to the reduction strategies and also having additions, you know, relative to some of the equity investments that are coming along. So, because there'll be a redirection of some of those funds, not necessarily in these slides, but in others, you know, that will be, say, from block 3, for example. So you'll see both of those.
Okay, and the facilities, I had a question about the facilities. So you said 185,000, if I remember correctly. Is that the non-ESSER portion of the Mary Hogan construction project that is coming off the books, or we are not doing it because we're cutting this?
No, it's already, it was one time, it was 200,000 that we put into construction services to help get the Mary Hogan project done. It's done now. So we do not need to budget for that 200,000.
So this is like the retiring debt. So it's coming off our books, we're not cutting anything.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So here we have state budget driver update.
I think, so Matt has put together some information relative to state budget drivers. It's not quite finalized yet, given
Okay.
that good news is that the state has done some contracting with Brad James, who was at the state and ran the finance department for a number of years. I've worked with Brad when I was there, and it's a wonderful hire back for them to do that. So at the next meeting, we'll revisit that, and you'll have a solid presentation relative to some of those numbers that the finance committee worked with us around this morning. So I think you'll have a more complete picture then. We just want to make sure that everything holds between now and next Monday.
Got it. Anything else in the superintendent's report?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thanks, Matt, for being here. Next is the report of the chair. Just have just a real brief item here, but before I start, I just want to thank the board. We've been so busy in so many committees, between policy, communications, finance, facility. Everyone has just, been really working hard and doing extra board meetings every once in a while as well. So I just wanted to take this moment to really appreciate the work that's going on at the board level, and it's really a lot going on. There's just so many things. Speaking of work going on, now what I'd like to do is talk about our January board meeting schedule. And typically, we have meetings on the second and the fourth Monday. And at our executive committee, we were looking at how much more work needs to get done from the budget presentation perspective, as well as being able to get it done by about the 21st, because our towns also take the finance information and roll it into their town reports. So we have to be done in time that we can then hand something off to them so that they can physically get their reports done as well. So looking at that, we decided that it really made sense that we should have a meeting on the 6th of January, which is new, continue with the 13th, and then instead of having the 27th, move that up to the 20th. So we would have 3 meetings kind of back each Monday, the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th in January, and not have the 27th, because at that point, really things need to be done and handed off so that, things will be warned, the budget information, the annual report information will be distributed to our various towns so that they can include it in their town reports as well. So, I know it's a lot. I really know it's a lot, but it's really important stuff that we're doing. It's a different approach that we're doing this year. We've really taken the furniture out of the house and bringing it back in, and then really understanding what the impacts will be, as we really apply the weightings and all that kind of thing, the new laws on the books for the tax, the CLA and average CLA and all that kind of thing. So, Steve, your hand is up?
Yeah, I have a slight objection to meeting on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is the 20th. How does the rest of the board feel about that?
I think we're not meeting that day.
We are.
We are.
We would
It's
be.
been changed.
I would have to miss 2 of those meetings, so.
The 6th and the 20th.
That is also there's, I don't know if this will matter, but there's a school break.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
But-
20th is a no school day.
If we moved it to the 21st, would that help?
I would be much happier with that than the 20th.
21st.
The Tuesday.
I could, yeah, that's potentially something I could do,
That's
yeah.
the last day, correct? That we would
Yeah.
have to have a vote
Yep.
to accept the budget presented.
Yep. Yeah, there's no
So there's
maneuvering room.
There's no wiggle room there.
Totally.
That's the week of break, right?
Yep.
That is a break day as well. The 20th and 21st are no school days.
Yep.
But I'm hearing we can't push it back to the 22nd.
Right.
Right.
Answering
Right.
Ellen's question. Childcare.
Yeah, so it's a dilemma because, looking at the calendar, the reason we had targeted the 20th is that it would give us a little maneuvering room, but we, definitely need to, at that point, have an approved budget.
I don't love it, but would it be better overall to move it to the Friday, the 17th? Just as far as board members?
Well, the
I'll
other
be
thing
out
to
of
keep
town.
in mind is that from a communications and engagement committee perspective, we are hoping to try to fit in a public meeting as well before final board approval of a budget. and do it in a manner that allows us to incorporate some of those comments and feedback. So that's the other sort of moving target. So we have to be careful not to crunch these meetings too close together to not allow opportunity for public input. So we had originally talked about the 16th for that.
Yeah.
We may have to think about moving that up if we're gonna do like the 17th instead of the 20th. So these are all the moving parts that we're trying to navigate.
The 17th, I mean, what do folks feel about that? Would that be better than the 20th, the week of the 20th?
I mean, I could do the 17th or the 21st. I just can't do the 20th.
Okay.
Or
Our
the
hope also is that you have a good solid spending plan on the 6th so that you would be comfortable approving your budget on the 13th. So it's possible that you might not need the meeting on the 17th, of course, right, state member dependent. But that certainly would be our hope, is that we would put you in a position to be able to approve a budget on the 13th.
So can you explain what would be happening on the 6th?
So on the 6th, what we'll bring you is a complete stack of blocks, if you will. And all the building level administrators will also plan to attend on the 6th, so that you should have everything sorted in the very best way that we can, with Matt drawing comparisons between, all right, so block 1 now as we've got it in FY25, if we'd organize it this way, would look like this. And here it looks like that. And here's how it looks in each of the schools. So to Steve's point, you're really able to see where everything went back in, and you're also able to hear why this budget is going to be good for kids and what it looks like relative to that. Which particularly the building principals will be able to be here to speak to if you'd like them to do that in that respect. So there may be some adjustments we may make that come from that, but I think the idea is that we're bringing you a spending plan on the 6th that the administration feels comfortable with, and then we can go from there, depending upon how you hear it.
Question?
Yes, Brian.
Besides the 6th, which other 2 dates have we actually nailed down at this point?
The 13th, which is a normal board date, and what we're talking about is the meeting I had proposed for the 20th, whether we do it on the 21st or the 17th.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, a way to resolve this, what I could do is send out a poll to see which of those 2 dates would be better.
Can we just do that now by a show
Sure,
of hands?
sure, okay.
Right here, why would we say?
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to move forward on the agenda, that's all. But understood.
Might it be possible to just make a motion?
Sure.
And then I would move that we have January meetings on the 6th, the 13th, and the 17th at 6:30 on each of those days.
Can I ask a question? Am I voting nay if I can't make it? Or I actually don't think this should be can we just do a straw poll on who can come when and then make a motion about whatever feels like are the dates that the critical mass of people can come?
Okay.
I don't want to vote against, if I just can't make it, I want to vote against the meetings happening.
Right. Okay.
That seems silly.
Okay, I'll withdraw the motion then.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, who could make a meeting on the 17th? Maybe.
And you can't see Joanna's hand from here.
It's up.
It's up.
Okay.
You'd have a quorum.
We'd have a quorum,
We would
okay?
have a quorum.
And the 21st?
Joanna's hand is also up.
Give it one.
10.
Okay, and I'm, of course, will be at either one of them.
I just,
Yes, Chip?
if there's a major snowstorm and we can't meet,
Yep,
we're screwed.
right.
Okay, I
We
mean,
meet
really
Tuesday.
relative to that, so having done this a
Zoom.
lot of times over the years,
yes.
we usually leave a little bit of wiggle room because there's always something, and
Yep.
this by statute is we have to have this done.
Okay, so what I would propose, I mean, if in fact we did decide to do it on the 21st, and it looked like there's a snowstorm, we could warn it as a virtual meeting if we, had to. If people, just one person has to be able to make it here, right? So I don't want people traveling when the weather is
Jason and
bad.
I'll come, we
Yeah,
live the
we'll
closest.
slaughter.
Yes. Guess they could put their snowshoes on.
I think I might
You
technically
might
a
be a
couple
little
blocks
closer.
closer.
You can,
Yeah.
put your snowshoes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so what was this count for 17?
So for the 17th, including you, Barb, 10.
Yep, yep,
For the 21st, including you, is 11. Can definitely.
okay. So, since they are
That's what I
so
counted.
close, I'm almost thinking I would go with Friday, just to, because of Chip's concern,
Give a little wiggle room.
to give the wiggle room, okay? And, so why don't we just plan on the 17th? And the 6th, I'm not asking, I'm assuming I'll have a quorum, right?
Yeah.
That we'll have a quorum, because we do need to have that meeting.
There's
Yes, Chip?
usually, sometimes we have meetings in certain days because they don't conflict with Middlebury Selectmen meeting and other
Yep.
types of things, so, I don't know what.
I guess,
What our television,
right. Okay.
schedule is, but I mean, that's,
Thank you.
That's a good point, though.
What, actually, maybe I should ask on the 7th, would it be better if we did it on the 7th, instead of on the 6th? For that extra meeting?
you know, the this
Not for.
select board
Okay.
works on Tuesday nights, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
so
not,
that probably wouldn't help. Okay, so
Might not.
let's stick with the 6th, the 13th, and the 17th. And
Okay.
again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your flexibility on this.
And then, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you mind? I just wanna, so just put on the radar that we will probably need to move, our projected public meeting, earlier.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that'll be another date that it would be great if folks could come to.
Yes. But it will
But
be.
not mandatory,
But it will
so-
be a
Right.
Zoom
Yeah,
kind of.
it'll most likely be a Zoom.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next, report of the board. We have a couple, items here. First, under policy committee, I'm gonna turn it over, to Jamie, to give us an update here.
Okay, thank you. So today, we bracketed 20 minutes for this, but just because, so our committee has been dealing with these two general policies, C30, which is about where you go to school, basically school residence, and D6, which is about class size, for the last couple of months because the board charged us to do it. And to sort of respond to intertwined issues related to predictability of class size and student success, basically. And so the policies are different but related. Today we're going to talk about D6 only for the most part, but we'll be talking about C30 soon. So I just walk people through some of the changes here. On my screen, when I submitted these, they were red. That was very easy to see what was different. I don't know what happened when they got transposed to board pack, but basically, I'll just highlight some of the main differences and then we can discuss them. And I think it would be most useful to honestly just start at the end. So there's a section at the end of the policy called policy contingencies. What this policy does is set minimum, maximum, and though not yet optimal class sizes that mostly pertain to elementary schools. So the question arose a few months ago, what do we do if we are out of compliance with this policy? Which sometimes we are. And so what our committee did over the last couple of weeks is to come up with an answer to that question, more or less. And so we're here tonight to see if you like it. So under policy contingencies, it says the first contingency is what happens if we have too many students in one class. And under that circumstance, we would empower the superintendent to divide the class up in ways that meet the class policy. In other words, if there's 24 first graders, then we would make 2 classes of 12, presumably, or something like that, which we already do. The second contingency, what if a class is too small? And this was the more interesting one. So it says, if a class is projected to have a size that falls below the requirements and the superintendent deems that the sort of instructional environment is jeopardized by that too small class size, the first thing we will do is invite families from across ACSD to join that school at that grade. So let's say we have a class of 5 first graders and we need to get 10 first graders to meet D6. We will look for 5 first graders who volunteered to go to that school. That would be the first contingency. We will make sure that moving students does not create a D6 problem somewhere else. That's point 3. What is this about? And we in the way we're thinking about it now, we will be able to provide transportation to all students whom.
Wait, point 4. If preferences don't.
Oh right, sorry. This is the most important part. Figures I would skip it. So if so the question is, so what happens if that doesn't work? Then this is like the next step. So then if we can't get enough students to ensure an adequate class size that meets A, the policy, and B, a adequate learning environment, then the superintendent can assign a cohort of students, i.e. the entire class, to another school. Under this circumstance, we would be able to provide transportation to those students, to the new school. The school we talked about correct me if I'm wrong, everyone else, but was the closest geographic school. Someone have a question?
That's only when the superintendent assigns it to a school, it's to that school.
That the transportation is provided?
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So the parent can't choose a different school.
That's the
correct.
next
Okay.
Correct.
That's the next one.
So correct. So that is the next point. So the committee is me, Ellen, Steve, and Laura. So if students or families in that cohort, that class, do not want to move to the school that we reassign them, we have written in another thing where they can choose to go to a different ACSD school. And in that case, we can't guarantee providing transportation to that new school. I'll just continue like another minute.
Okay.
Then, so that took longer than you would think to come up with. That little, if not this, then this kind of thing. And it's probably the newest part of the policy. We have not changed our current class size guidelines. We haven't amended them at all. And they're written on the policy here. The other thing we did that's of note.
Something about combined classes.
Well, on the first paragraph of the last sentence in the first paragraph, we say a class, in quotation marks, shall be defined as a group of students composed of 1 or 2 grades of students unless otherwise authorized by the superintendent. So in other words, trying to define what a class is, optimally 1 or 2 grades of people, of students. So the point of all this is just to try to ensure as best we can learning environments that are both optimal for success and for predictability of delivering education. I don't know, other committee members, does that sound like a reflection of our...
And also to avoid the situation we were in the beginning of the school year where we were up against these challenges but didn't have a process, so that anyone could predict or anyone could rely on, which had it been in place, if something had been predictable and established a year ago, there would have been a lot of conversations that could have probably been smoother and less fraught for everybody.
And in our deliberations, this was brought to us by the superintendent to ask for policy support for any actions that she might take. We were very careful about asking her, does this provide her the policy support that she was looking for, to which she responded, yes, it does.
Is that a question or?
I didn't want to. You were looking at me like I was talking from Mars, so I thought that's where we were. So.
Yes, I mean we did obviously in June, actually way back at the end of June, you know, when we talked about some of the class configuration work that goes on, and when the superintendent's required annually to give a D6 report. And so the question I raised at that time is, I don't have any measures in order to ensure that we're in compliance with D6. And of course, the circumstance that we navigated this fall, I think could have been avoided significantly if we had had some specific language in the policy that would have allowed us to be able to provide remedies in that circumstance. So this does meet all of those challenges. It doesn't meet the larger pieces that I think are more the long-term conversations the policy committee is having, but it does meet the immediate needs that may come up as we are planning for the 25-26 school year.
Did you want to say more, Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that our discussion around this was really very heavily centered upon student success and student outcomes, and what is required in a classroom to have predictability from grade to grade, and making sure that children in all of our schools are experiencing the same curriculum throughout their elementary education. And that was really where we're coming from a policy standpoint.
Questions? Ellie?
Yeah, so my first question was already answered, which was, could it be a combined class of two different grades? But my second question is, there was some ambiguity in there, which is good, which saying that it could be either the class size threshold or the what was the language you used around the class atmosphere or
institutional, something like
the integrity of the instructional environment. That is a direct quote from Wendy Baker.
I'm curious if the class size is the thing that triggers that, or would the superintendent with this also be able to, maybe if there was a little bit more than 10 students but felt like sending a kid to another school would be beneficial, would that give her that leeway as well?
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but my understanding is that if we look at our projection, let's say next year we have a first grade class of 5 people, and we're like, or let's say it's 11, let's say it's 21. That would be one person over the limit. And is this the right example? Well, anyway, so we would what?
Say it was 9.
It was 9. It was 9. It was under 10, right? But just under. And so Wendy would say, we have a D6 thing. Let's talk about it. And then, there's some assessment to be made that says, okay, well, in this situation, we feel it's an issue. And then we go through a process and trying to figure out what to do, following some slides laid out here. If she goes in and says, you know what, 9 in this circumstance actually works fine. It would be more disruptive to change things than 9's fine. I think that is sort of what you're...
No, a little bit different. I was thinking more if there was, say, 11 children in a class and it was definitely disruptive, or like one of those kids feels like that atmosphere isn't appropriate for them. Is this also allow the superintendent to choose to send a child to another school?
It would not in that case. That's not what we discussed in that case. That may be something that they discuss as far as more of a long-term plan of stabilizing enrollment or providing choice that's different. At this point, any other movement is parent-initiated. The only movement that is not parent-initiated is related to the class size policy when there are too few students in order to make the class size minimum.
I mean, we currently have a provision in C30 that says if you experience hardship, educationally, whatever it may be, you can appeal to go to a different school. And so if you're a Lebanon example and you're saying one person is suffering undue hardship or struggling in capacity, there's a provision in C30 to allow that person to request a move.
We're also, as Jamie said at the beginning, we're talking about C30, which is where kids go to school, and D6, which is how many kids are in a class. This is our D6 immediate proposal and idea, and then there's the larger conversation around C30, which speaks to some of what you're saying, Ellie, and then also D6. And those, because you can't really separate the two in the long term. So that's where that's another conversation that is ongoing at the policy committee, to come back to the board with another round of ideas about what to do next.
Thank you. Jason.
So this would effectively eliminate any 3-classroom or 3-grade classrooms.
They could only exist with superintendent approval.
Okay, so they still could exist.
It doesn't mean they could never exist, but in order to exist, they would have to be thoroughly examined, and we could determine that it's an appropriate exception for whatever reason. But it would be an exception. Yeah.
Other questions? Mary Heather?
I have a few questions. And first, I just want to commend the policy committee for their work on this. I know it's a super difficult issue. I know it's taken a lot of round and round discussions, and if that, then this, and I think you all really worked well together and put your heads together well. When I was initially looking at it, some of the things that I wondered about have already been answered. So like the example of what's a class and whether it's combined, and if so, how many grades. So I think that's probably the sort of first thing that I was looking for, because that seemed to be the biggest issue, was having more than 2 grades in a classroom. And so whatever fix happened needed to specifically address that. One of the things that I wondered too was why the committee didn't look at the number of students in a classroom. I know it's intended for, immediate fix for next year, but I do think, given the time it takes to do policy change, I think there is an opportunity to really take a hard look at that number 10. And one of the things that I'm specifically thinking about is the number, sort of the minimum number of students that you can have in a class to be able to report data. So it seems like an opportunity that, especially as our strategic plan is focused on student performance, this whole effort is focused on student performance, that perhaps we should be centralizing the discussion on how we structure our classrooms in a manner that allows us to openly discuss data related to student performance. So it seems like a little bit of a missed opportunity to not really focus on that number. I know, 10 has been the number, and it sort of seems like this, how do we get X school to 10 in a classroom? But I think we need to be thinking a little bit bigger, and given this work and how it relates to, our efforts in strategic planning and student performance, it seems really crucial to me to have that number, at a minimum, the reportable number for student data. I do have a few other things. So that just is kind of one observation I wanted to bring up and encourage the committee to revisit that and look at specifically the minimum number of students for that. The other thing is, I do wonder, I kind of just went through, obviously this applies to a lot of schools, not just Ripton, but some of our other small schools. And so one of the things that just sort of struck me was, okay, so essentially we'd be asking the superintendent to, if a classroom does not meet D6, to go out, do an attendance survey to try to, find students, find volunteers to fill those slots. And in this case, for next year, for example, for Ripton, that means we'd be going out and instructing the superintendent to go out and find 8 students to move in lieu of moving 2. And so I guess I wonder whether, whether the board wants to consider, and I'm not advocating one way or another, but I'm just making this observation. If we have an expectation that our superintendent go and sort of try to find volunteers, should the classroom perhaps be at least halfway there to D6? Do we want to set a standard like that? I'm just bringing it up for conversation's sake, mostly because, I don't know how long it will take us to adjust C30 and really take a good hard look at what's the catchment for each of our buildings to produce a sustainable population. But if it takes more than a year, and we're asking our superintendent to go and find volunteers, that's an effort. I don't know if it's a considerable effort or not, but I guess I just am wondering, like, is that what we want done every year? It may be, and that's fine. I'm just bringing it up as, if we've got a classroom that is repeatedly, consistently below half the required students for D6, maybe this ought to be triggering a bigger conversation rather than doing sort of the enrollment equivalent of a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying this in a judgment sort of way. I'm just wondering, just kind of going through the thought exercise of what this would look like on a year-to-year basis if we're unable to quickly address C30. So that's one other thing. I do think in number 3, in contingency number 3, I say this just as I think the class should be indicated as classroom, just because class, when I first looked at it, I was like, shall consider class. It just kind of kicked me out for a moment, so it's just a suggested word change to make sure that we're speaking about classroom size and not class.
Oh yeah.
And then finally, I just want to bring this up as, again, like an equity question. And I'm not advocating one way or another, but if transportation is not offered for volunteer families, for invited families, I do wonder about the equity of that. And then the other aspect is, obviously, the superintendent has to keep in mind complying with D6 at other schools. And so if a child or a family in a small school wants to transfer, but can't because leaving would then render that classroom out of compliance, I just wonder really, who is this opportunity open to? And, if you look at the classroom populations in a lot of our small schools, it may not be available to everyone. It may be mostly available to Cornwall and Middlebury. Which is not exactly the sort of equitable effort that I think the board would like to make. I'm not saying that that's, like a deal breaker or anything. I guess it's just something that I think we should think about. And I don't know, the impact to transportation if we were to offer transportation, if that's a calculus that we can figure out. But those are the things that just kind of bubbled up to me, looking at that. So otherwise, I would just say, I think it's a really great effort at finding a kind of compromise, finding a way for us to solve a problem that has been vexing us for a long time. I just think that there's some other things that we probably should look at a little carefully before we sign off on it.
I think Wendy's
Did you wanna?
I could just offer 2 points of clarification to Mary Heather's points that might be helpful. One is that the reporting requirement is by grade.
Yes.
So so actually probably unless you do some sort of a reconfiguration that allows at least 12 students per single grade to be in a single school, which is you're quite far from in most of the smaller schools. That wouldn't necessarily apply. So it's not just your class size. And the other point that might be helpful.
Maybe that's a long-term thing that
Yep,
we need to be thinking
exactly.
about.
More of a long-term thing. The other point is that there is right now slated to be one of our 184 classrooms across Addison Central that would be impacted by this policy for the FY 25-26 year. So only one. The others would be able to meet the requirement with the 2 grades, without a problem.
And just a point of clarification, and then I'll go to you and Alan. So assuming that a cohort of students needed to be moved after going through this process, then that's where they're gonna stay, correct, for future years, right?
That would be important to parents to know, yes, I would imagine, yes.
Right, so it's not like, each year you're, trying to get that class size up for that grade. It's like, once that happens, you move those students somewhere else, and that's where they're gonna stay for the remainder of their elementary years. I just wanted to, at least that's the understanding I had. And then the other thing is, this doesn't preclude the board from looking at a larger policy about intra-district school choice, right? This is really only a very thin slice of choice if in fact you've been targeted that you're gonna be moving to somewhere else. So I think, we've taken that up in the past before, but that is a totally separate item, which would be maybe a C30, where you're offering intra-district school choice, where then I think the equity and all that would have to be thought out very carefully. Okay. I don't know which is first, Steve or Steve?
So Mary Heather, you said if someone wants to choose and that knocks another class out of the D6 compliance, Wendy, we specifically talked about that. That choice would not be allowed.
Right. That's part of it.
That's part of that. That's in here.
But that's Mary Heather's point.
Yeah, but and the other thing was you talked about transportation. We currently have all schools, all of the rural elementary schools currently send a bus to Middlebury. And so if there's only one school that we need to transport them from, it may not be that onerous to transport them from off of that bus to the school that they're being sent to. We're not talking about sending a Bridport kid to Weybridge and then a Cornwall kid to Ripton, and that's not the kind of choice we're talking about here. It's just to do this one situation.
Well, it could be.
It could be.
It depends on where your volunteers are coming from.
I mean, it's the volunteers, Steve. So if I live in Bridport, but I volunteer to send my kid to Salisbury, but transportation's not guaranteed by the district, and I can't make that work, then I'm effectively not able to take advantage of that. Same if my kid is currently in a 11 kid or a 10 kid classroom, but if I volunteer that or is slated to be, and then Wendy's like, I can't do it, because then that triggers a different D6 crisis in that class. So there are those limitations that are built in, is what Mary Heather's saying, from like who can volunteer and who can't, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the equity discussion that we had.
That's what. Yeah. That's what.
Yeah. It's exactly the equity discussion we had.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think Mary Heather's points are really valid, and for me, they just bring up, again, why we're not saying like, here's the solution, fixed it forever, because we haven't, and anyone who's paid any attention to the policy committee meetings has seen us like throwing lots of stuff at the wall and getting lost in some of that, and then trying to pull back to come up with the immediate fix for truly in some ways this year, if not for maybe next year, if wherever we end up, and the longer term process that we're on as a board, but really recognizing that there's a much bigger conversation that we're starting to have at the policy level, but not trying to bake so fully that there's not a lot of work for this board to do together as well. So there are lots of other issues that are not addressed by this that we have to get into.
Jason.
why wouldn't we also try and target having like these minimums apply to a single grade in a single class, right? Why? Because, I mean, something that Superintendent Williams said last year rings true, that if combined grades in classrooms was the optimal way to deliver elementary school education, we would do it in every building in the district.
There's some people who think it works really well. This has actually been a big discussion in the policy committee of and not just like, oh, from a parent, like there are a lot of educators and there are a lot of, it's not definitive. I think that like it's not, that it's secondary, that it's like not as effective. I think from our understanding, there are circumstances in which it works better than others, but it's not as simple as saying multi-age cohorts is a lesser education than single-age cohorts. I don't think it's that simple.
Jason, could you give an example of what you're thinking about?
Well,
I wasn't sure from the
like,
first part of what you're saying.
I'll date myself 30 some odd years ago, I was in a 5th, 6th combined classroom that was very intentional. We had enough, students to have a full 5th grade class, full 6th grade class, but they broke it into 2 combined 5th, 6th classrooms, and that was like a little experiment we did in my elementary school back in the day. It was great, except for like all the things you had to combine for the grade level, like, oh, we got to do math, oh, we got to break it out into 5th and 6th, and so we can do math, and so it was sort of like an experiment that never went anywhere. So I'm just thinking, like, if that was like the best way to deliver a 5th, 6th grade education, why aren't we doing it at Mary Hogan? Why aren't we doing it in Cornwall? Why aren't
So we do that throughout in a lot of different ways, and there are schools in Addison Central that do choose to break up grades when they don't have to break up grades, from time to time. I think a lot of it depends on the students. It's much more straightforward to do straight grades. It's much more operationally, conducive to I guess efficient operations to do them in straight grades. But I taught in multi-grade classrooms for most of my teaching career, and there are a number of tremendous benefits to that. If you are somebody who wishes to have an assignment that is a multi-grade assignment, and if you're in a circumstance where you can break up, circumstances so that you can create good instructional programming. So it is something that I think the policy committee will be wrestling with in their second round, which is more of a long-term kind of conversation. This proposal, as I'm understanding it, is really designed to make sure we don't move into the planning for the next year in a way that doesn't provide options for clear guidance.
Steve?
I mean, Jason brings up a good point, but and really Courtney is the expert on this. I don't think there's research that supports either way right now, whether combined classrooms are good or bad. So if we're making a research-based decision, saying that people like it, that's anecdotal. I don't think the research supports it either way. So if we're going to make a research-based decision, you're not going to get a lot of support from the literature, frankly. So
what's the next step?
Well, I'll just kind of say one thing
Yes,
before
you
that.
may.
So one thing that is still a question for me in this is the notion of an optimal class size. Like our procedure is like you have to set a minimum, a maximum, and an optimal. And an optimal so far is the one that meets the policy. That's sort of what we've sort of decided in a way. And so I'm just saying that the procedure for this policy seems to read a little bit like a little out of date, and it might be worth. We did not. Our committee does not write procedure, so we didn't look at it. But it might be worth looking into that a little bit. I think, and actually, some of it gets to this issue that Jason brings up about, relationship of class to outcomes, having research that supports a causal thing there. As far as next steps go, as Barb asked, we're meeting tomorrow. So this feedback that you've given us is useful. And I assume we have to write this with legal eyes on it. No? So I'm assuming, I'm looking at you a little, I mean, do we?
Yeah, well, what you've done here passes relative legal muster. I mean, if you're
Okay.
going to move forward for bringing it for a first read, then we'll go ahead and run it through that process to
right.
make sure that anything that we need to add is added and so on and so forth. But I don't imagine it will change what you have here dramatically.
Okay, so right, so I put this watermark on it for discussion only, just because, so everyone and the public understands that this is not like the first read of the policy, so whenever we have another meeting, when's our next meeting? Next week?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have enough time to warn it for that meeting, right?
You do for first read
We do
if
for
you were to
first read.
choose to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a vote.
Okay, so
An
we
action.
could warn it again for next week. That could be the next step, and then I guess tomorrow at our meeting, we will probably spend some time at least talking about it and thinking about some of the things Mary Heather and others raised.
Okay.
I will also say that we all agreed on this policy. I just want to stress that. Everyone understand? You know, it's like it took us weeks to come to this, and honestly, this meeting happened by accident. We were talking about something else, and we get the whole slides on, then we're like, wait a minute, what, you know, and we found our way to a solution, basically in one meeting, which was incredible. And so I just want to say that because it was, in some ways was the result of a lot of work, and then it all happened sort of at once.
Yeah.
And then I met with Wendy after, and we sort of dotted some of the I's. But for the most part, you know, we feel like we conceptually separated D6 and C30 enough to report on this, but some of the things that you raised, Mary Heather, are then in some ways the next step, which is to figure out ways in which they aren't separated in some ways. Like, you know, you raised this issue of, well, what if every year we're trying to scramble to create a new class? Well, that is hopefully an issue that would be solved by a larger discussion about long-term planning for the district.
Right.
So that's, I guess, the way I would think about it. And as Ellen said, I think that, you know, a couple months ago we had a pretty tough time with situation up in Ripton, and I think had we had this on our desks, we would have been like, oh, okay, well, here's what we do. And I think that's sort of why Dr. Baker kept, you know, stressing to us, be like, well, what do I do? Tell me, you know, and then so this is an attempt at that. But anyway, we can talk about it tomorrow and bring another version back if need be with some edits slightly.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you to the policy committee.
Thank you.
Next on under the report of the board, we have a facilities update. Jason?
Yep. A couple months ago, Maple Broadband approached ACSD about requesting access for 2 easements on district land to house communications equipment. One in Ripton and one in Middlebury. So in board pack, you'll see the easement text and the exhibit, which is a map that shows you the Middlebury location. Matt's gonna bring it up on the screen. Can't really see it too well, but it's on just off Mary Hogan Drive on the left-hand side. This is land that is owned by ACSD. It is currently leased to the town of Middlebury as part of the rec park facilities adjacent to Mary Hogan. The proposed site has already been reviewed by the Middlebury Select Board, and they approved it. It's been through legal review by a district attorney. It's not district attorney, the district's attorney.
Lawyer looked at it.
Yeah, lawyer looked at it. And he had no problems with the easement text or anything associated with it. So it is merely for us to review, approve. This is a permanent easement that will go in the land records. So this is forever and ever. So if you have any hesitations about giving up 18 feet by 38 feet of district land to Maple Broadband, now is the time to voice your concern. So I'm going to make a motion, and then we can second and discuss.
And then have more discussion. Yep.
One moment.
Yep.
I move that we authorize the board chair to execute the utility easement deed between the Addison Central School District and Addison County Communications Union District, doing business as Maple Broadband, for the 18-foot by 38-foot parcel on Mary Hogan Drive, as warned in Exhibit A in the agenda.
Second.
Chip seconds it. Okay, discussion. We have a motion on the floor. Okay, Steve and then Ellie.
Forever and ever, and this is gonna be on school property. I'm assuming there's, and I have not read this, is there stuff in there about safety, cause this is electrical, and these are elementary school kids?
Yeah, so it's not electrical, it's communications equipment. So, and it's fiber optic communications equipment, so there's electric power, but it's not like high voltage terminals or anything like that.
Go ahead.
And it's quite a ways from the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is about the community gardens that are located there. Would they have to be removed? Or are they gonna be?
I don't think so, I think it's just next to where the community gardens are.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are further.
Any other questions? Mary Heather?
I guess I assume Parks and Rec is aware of this since the select board, okay.
Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll call the question, and I'm not gonna repeat all that you said. So I can't do that. All those in favor of approving the easement with Maple Broadband indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And I didn't see Joanna, because we were sharing.
Aye.
Okay, sorry, Joanna. Thank you. It passed, the motion passes.
Great, thank you all. Just a heads up that we'll be doing a similar thing for the Ripton easement, probably at a January meeting, best guess.
Okay, moving on. Next up on our agenda, at our last board meeting, Dr. Baker had shared with us a two-part request that she had received from several community leaders for us to consider as part of our fiscal '23 budget planning process. And when we talked about them last week, folks agreed that it would be good to bring that forward and put it on the agenda. It's here. I had it purposely after our policy discussion, because of, that kind of feeds into this as well, right? So, just to remind folks, the two-part, request was, number one, surveying Ripton families about their interest in having their students remain at, RES with the current circumstances. And number two, surveying ACSD families to see if there would be a sufficient number of students interested in enrolling at RES to stabilize the population for the 25-26 academic year, while the board is determining long-term solutions. So, in light of our policy discussion earlier, it, follows that, we can talk about this one specifically. It was a request, and this is discussion. The way that it was, I think, warned on the agenda, we could take an action on this, a possible action on this if we wanted to. I felt that we could at this board meeting, but I'm opening it up for discussion, what people are thinking about these requests that we've received. And if I need to repeat the request, I'd be happy to do so. Okay, Chip and then Jamie.
Okay.
If I was being asked this question as a parent, I would have a lot of other questions to ask, okay? Is Ripton gonna be around in 3 or 4 years? Okay, number one. What am I going to gain from going from Salisbury or Mary Hogan to Ripton? Other than the questions that we talked about in very individual cases, but if I was answering this questionnaire. So I would be very conflicted in knowing how to answer this if I was asked the question. Now, maybe that's not true of everybody else, but I would have many other questions that I would need to have answered before I could answer it.
And I believe the request, and correct me if I should probably elaborate on a little bit more. This would be in the case of a situation where you have this situation that we just talked about in D6, where you have a class size, say a 1-2, one kindergarten, one first grader. So you would really only be surveying those parents that are impacted and the grades impacted, right?
I think the nexus of the request from the community was that if we're making decisions about where students are going because of enrollment issues, that we're making an effort to determine is that sort of the last step in the process? Are there other students that might wanna come? You know, what does that look like? The thing that it makes me think about, relative to the policy discussion we just had that is a different point is, in the case where you might have, say, one kindergartner and one first grader, then do you actually ask those parents if they'd like to remain before you go out to determine if you can bring in 8 more, for example, you know, that's not discussed in the policy, and that was the other side of that coin that the community members in Ripton talked about, just to make sure that the community members in Ripton are committed to that experience in the same way. So that did not come up in time for the policy committee to think about that, so I don't know how that may or may not relate. Otherwise, you may have actually taken care of the first request that the community members were thinking about, just to make sure that if there is a group of students to be moved, that there is a check-in, you know, with others to see if somebody else would wanna come. Ellen?
I do think what Chip brings up is an interesting question, though, of what information is provided along with the questions. So, because there's a presumption of you know exactly what your options are, and you really don't if you've never been a family in the community of a school. Whether it's because your kid's not yet in any school and you're deciding, you know, if you kind of know where you think your kid's going to end up, or if it's, well, yeah, my kid is supposed to go to X school, but I don't know, what's that place like? What do they have that this place doesn't, or what would my child's experience be like there? I'm not as familiar. So I think in thinking about survey design, which I know Mary Slosar had commented to us about before, and sort of how that can be done in the most effective outreach way, just in designing the questions, I think there is something to be determined around what information is provided to parents in trying to make decisions about a theoretical option that they are less familiar with. And I assume that part of this idea is generated from a feeling within Ripton of, you know, our current C30 policy has been very strictly interpreted for a very long time, which is that it's pretty difficult to request that your kid go to a school outside of the town where you live, if not extraordinarily so. So it's just I think from a suspicion of maybe there are families out there, maybe there are 20 or 30 families out there where if there had been more flexibility in that policy or a different policy in place, they would have wanted their child to attend. I have no idea if that's true or not, but I think I can imagine that curiosity is burning for people feeling like the population is smaller and maybe it could be stabilized. But I do think just it's a great idea to ask questions, to get data anywhere and any way we can as we're making all kinds of decisions. But it's important to what you're saying, Chip, that people have some information to make, you know, to answer questions from.
Joanna has her hand raised.
I'm sorry, Joanna? Thank you.
Thanks. I totally agree with the point made by Chip and Ellen about the information. The other piece is the timing of it, and I think with the potential D6 policy change, those questions are going to evolve based on how that process plays out, and the questions that might be posed to some Ripton elementary school families might depend on how the results of that, the potential policy change. Like, for example, if a cohort is moved, does it affect the whole school environment? So does it affect other families in other grades that aren't directly related to the K1 class, for example? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I can't see everybody's, but I just think the timing of it is really important, and we should just allow things to play out in order to get appropriate information.
Jason and then Mary Heather.
So the D6 policy, as we just reviewed it, says kindergarten maximum would be 19, minimum would be 10. So in this case, we're saying it's gonna be a combined K-1 classroom, that's a given. But we could have as many as 17 additional students join that classroom, and be compliant with that policy. How do you then, I mean, like, is 5 kindergartners and 14 first graders, is that okay, or would you still try and like make it like half kindergarten or half first grade, or?
We would determine the best instructional environment, and I think, and I say that, in that there's a lot that goes into that, so there'd be a process where the educators would go about doing that to make sure that that it's balanced well. I mean, it doesn't have to be 50-50 necessarily, so, yeah.
Mary Heather?
Yeah, I guess, I'm kind of going back to my earlier comment about the effort of recruiting versus, what is the goal? If the goal is to create a stable learning environment for students, I guess I'm stuck on that, and the effort of recruitment. And I guess the other thing is that I feel like as a district, we would probably want some kind of commitment from the families that they're gonna stay, if they're gonna, so that we don't, and I know I'm like bleeding into this long-term question. I think we need to be prepared for the possibility that this may take a while for us to figure out. And I guess I'm uneasy with the idea of treating this like we're on an airplane, can you move over here so that the weight is shifted appropriately? I mean, we're talking about a classroom environment. What is our function and our mission and our goal? I don't think it's this, how can we get to 10? I think I just want to make sure that we're putting appropriate care into that.
Laura?
I think, for at least from the policy committee discussions, that we're not thinking of it so much as recruitment as allowing families that would like to send their kids to that whatever classroom cohort have the opportunity to do so. Mm-hmm. So not going out and actively asking for people to do that, but to say, hey, we have this opportunity in this classroom where we could take X number of students, and is there interest in this? And then going from there.
One point that Joanna made that I think is important is for the policy committee to consider, is that generally speaking, their siblings are allowed to go together, and so that could mean that that gets just a little bit more complicated. That might be something to just add to the discussion for tomorrow night to make sure that it's thought through.
And I want to, and again, this is a short term, just for the fiscal 26 budget planning request. I think the Ripton request that we have in front of us.
The agenda item you're talking about now.
Yes. Not necessarily the long term. It's really for the specific, because we know there's one kindergartner and one first grader, right? And the way I'm interpreting it would be to then survey those particular parents to see if in fact they want to stay or not. And if in fact they don't, then that could change whether you do the survey or not to find others to come in, right? Yeah. And if they do, then doing a survey, seeing if there's anyone, as Laura says, would like the opportunity to be there. And it's just really for this specific school year, for this, until the policies is all in place, is, just to scope this request, I believe, that we're talking about. Yes, Ellen, and then Laura?
Yeah, and Laura, I agree with the way that you were framing the policy conversations, and I also think we talked about it from the lens of before making a dramatic decision of like there's a cohort of kids, however small, whose families anticipated they would be attending a certain school who will now be required to attend a different school. that you just do, that there be some effort made to confirm that there's no means by which that class could get filled otherwise by interested families willing to go there. So it feels like actually a pretty low bar way, and I don't think it's like, so everyone's got 9 months to figure this out, or there's gonna be like a major PR campaign to go like find, like Laura said, I mean, I think it's small communities, people will get the word out, but it's really meant to just confirm, not operate on assumptions that there's no other option, and to confirm like this is the option. And I think that's a way of making it feel necessary, but also hopefully understandable to the people who are most affected by it.
The other thing I'm understanding out of all this that might be helpful for the policy committee to determine, to think about tomorrow night is whether or not you would want to give the first option for change to the families that are in the town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to say, would you like us to go ahead and recruit, or would you really prefer a different option? Because you're no longer necessarily going to be in a classroom with kids from your town. You know, that changes what you might have been expecting to experience.
Yeah.
So that's another point that perhaps the policy committee can take up next time.
And specific, I'm a broken record, sorry. And specific to this particular request, it sounds like at this point, there's been some good thoughts that are going back to the policy committee.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, are we in a position or want to be, you know, do we need more time to think about what we want to do specifically with this request? Because it's independent to some extent to the policy. It's related now, obviously, because of how the policy was presented today. Yeah.
So, I think we should do this survey work, but I think it's a little early to do it personally. I think we should table the deciding what survey work to do until we have approved or not approved any changes to D6.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't know if that's a motion technically or not.
No,
We're just
that's
discussing
perfect.
it.
That's perfect. How do others feel?
Do we need a motion? It's not a board activity to
No.
conduct a survey, right? So
No.
why would the board even like weigh in on it other than just to discuss?
Yeah.
To direct,
To
perhaps
direct
direct the superintendent to do a survey.
Oh.
I think it was just a matter of making sure that we're not asking members of the public questions about where they might like to go to school if that's not consistent with the board's understanding of the types of things that you're working your way through.
Right.
So we just make sure we're all operating together
For
in
the
those
same,
ways.
yeah.
But I think you've satisfied the requirement for now, you know, of what the community members were asking. We can see maybe how your D6 goes from here.
I mean, so did we satisfy it?
I think your D6 has come along, your revision's come along since that time, so I think for now, you're probably okay. They're guessing that I'll have emails if that's not the case here shortly, so.
And and I think the only part that isn't is whether you survey the Ripton families.
Yeah, that's what,
yeah.
that's what I
We
meant
can
to be,
talk about
Yeah, and you guys could, and that could be something then we talk about later if you decide not to put it in D6 specifically. Right. We can put this back on the agenda, but it sounds like the general thought is, as Laura nicely put it, is to really, let's delay on this, let's let the policy work go forward, and then we can circle back and see if there's anything more we need to discuss and decide on this. Does that capture it? Okay, thank you. Great.
I have.
Yes, Steve.
I hear all the time from people who are advocates of keeping these very small schools open that closing small schools is no magic bullet or no silver bullet. And I keep hearing from them that choice is a magic bullet and will solve all of our problems. And I really think that that is a dangerous road to go down. It is not a magic bullet, and it creates all kinds of problems, including equity problems. So if you're going to ask about choice across the district, why aren't you asking the rest of the district about closing small schools? Why aren't we taking a survey about that? Because I hear a lot from Middlebury residents is, why do the small schools have such a large voice on the board? It's like we don't even get heard. So if you're gonna start surveying people, survey them about that too, because it is one of the solutions. Closing Ripton affects the district, and choicing people into Ripton could be expensive, and again, it could create equity issues. Ripton is the third wealthiest school in terms of students in poverty, so we choice in people who tend to be more affluent, and it creates a already difficult situation. So I think, okay, if Ripton wants to take a survey, let's do some more surveys. So I object to this tail wagging the dog. So probably alone, but I think it needed to be said.
Okay. So, moving forward, we now have a second public comment period. And at this time, we've allocated 10 minutes. So I didn't change the 10 minutes. It's been a long night, but I definitely open it up to public comments about anything you've heard tonight, or continuation of the comments that we were hearing before. And Steve?
I do want to, I know you have a whole list of people signed up previously, so I want to jump that line. So.
Okay. So we do have a sign.
How you guys want to do it?
Yeah.
I've got 8 folks here, but I recognize we probably lost a few of them.
Yes.
We may have gained 1 or 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Read
Why don't we read through the list to see who's still here and cross out the ones that have gone home?
Jordan Young still here. Nez Baker, yes. Ari, Amy, I think it's online. Mariah, that's one. Liam, Sayud, I think Jessica Chatfield went home, and Maurice is on. So we're down to 7.
Can we also just check online?
Yes, check
Some folks might
online.
have gone home and logged in.
Lester is still on her hand raised.
Can we answer?
She was the NAACP representative.
Can we answer one of those questions?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that all board meetings are public. That's all.
Yeah.
And it looks like
Committee
Elliot
meetings as well.
saying I didn't sign up earlier, so that's another online.
So, yes, suggestion.
Well, so I don't have a great, I wonder if it makes sense to some extent, to prioritize people who are sitting and have been sitting in this room. This is no disrespect to anyone on the Zoom or anything, but like, it is a certain level of commitment and a certain level of whatever, and I feel like that deserves some special consideration.
Okay. Yep. So, I agree with, I'm fine with that, if everyone is fine with that, that's on the board?
Yep.
Okay, so why don't we go through the list and then add to it? We have a couple folks, Paige and Steve.
Great. Well, Jordan can start while I add
Yes.
other names to the list.
And
I drove through the snow.
Just kidding. My name's Jordan Young. I'm a 30-year resident of Cornwall. My children attended Addison Central Schools, and I was chair of the late lamented Cornwall School Board, and I think on the ACSU board for a little bit as well. I'm a trained sexuality educator and have taught an award-winning sexuality education curriculum for many of the past 20 years. I have a master's in social work from UVM, and in the latter part of my career, I did clinical counseling in middle school and high school. I identify as gender non-binary, and I urge you not to contribute to the erasure of gender diversity from our culture. A number of speakers earlier talked about how they found a book or a person or a thing that sort of opened up their world. In my case, as a teenager, it was Jan Morris's autobiography, and if you haven't read her autobiography entitled Conundrum, I recommend it. She's also a wonderful travel writer, published stuff throughout her career. There were no other examples of non-binary people, of queer people in my world, in my school,
at that point, and it's something that I really needed. Many of the students that I worked with struggled to envision themselves in society for the same reason. Some of them had the desire to explore their gender and sexuality, and all of them benefited from that exploration. Some of those students found themselves comfortable in the roles that they saw around them. Others of those students found their sense of self nourished by the realization that there are many ways to walk in the world. Some of them did that exploration with the support of their families, and some of them did it in the face of severe opposition. Those students need access to these kinds of books to open the conversation for themselves, just the way I needed access to that kind of information when I was younger. Many of you may not know that one of the most iconic pictures of book burnings from the 20th century is a picture of a major library of gender and sexuality scholarship being torched by a mob. Please do not let the momentum toward a replay of that moment begin here. Let our students have access to the information they need in order to live the healthy, diverse, fulfilled lives that they must discover for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Okay, next on our list.
Wow, standing up. I want to say, like, wow, I think you are mental marathoners. I'm really impressed with the attention span. Yeah, so my name is Mez Baker-Medard. I'm a parent of 2 first graders, and Mary Hogan, and I live just down the street. And yeah, just a genuine thank you for all this deliberation that you do, stewarding our kids' education. And just so gratitude first and foremost. And I'm not going to rehash what has been really eloquently said earlier. I think one thing that people critique is like, oh, they're too young in kindergarten or in first grade to be exploring in this. And as kindergarten, as 4-year-olds, they see gender. They have so many questions about it. And if anything, I think books that have been explored in Mary Hogan and at home help quench a little bit of curiosity. And there's going to be more and more questions that, I close the book and more questions come. So I don't think it's too early. I think that's a real problem that people think that there's an age at which we need to start talking about these things. And I appreciate what you said. These are research. These are age-appropriate books. Doctors and psychologists. So I think one request or question that I have for the board is, what kind of policies might you establish to actually get ahead of future book bans? And not just, oh, we're going to take this particular petition and, run it through a process, but is there something that the process itself can actually prevent future books from being removed, or the inclusion of actually really thoughtful, diverse perspectives to actually be implemented in a more robust way? Because I know some teachers don't choose to read certain books, and so what would it be like if we actually flipped this and said these should actually be taught in all first grade classrooms or all kindergarten classrooms? And I think I would love to hear a little bit more about how public defamation may be addressed. And I know you said, I'm pretty appalled at the public defamation that's happened to a teacher that my kids had and loved. It's like posts that are just gross are still out there, and so I'm not sure how that's done, but I know it's hosted to some extent on the Facebook page of Mary Hogan, and so are there ways to get rid of posts that follow, Facebook free speech protocols that are defamation? And I know that gets into kind of some legal territory that you probably can't respond to, but I would like to implore you to not make it just behind closed doors, but make some of that decision making available to the people who want to know. So what was decided and how can that be taken care of? Because it's public, we see it as well. And so whatever protocol or process you come up with, I'd love to. And here we support it back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all
all so much for being here and for hearing us, and for all of the amazing work you do and especially have done this evening. It's very enlightening, and I appreciate the excuse to listen through it that I wouldn't otherwise. My name is Ari Graham-Gerland. I'm from Middlebury. I'm a member of class of 23 at MUHS, and I'm now in my second year at Dartmouth College. I go by she, her pronouns. And the personal perspective I want to add into this discussion on book banning, which I definitely oppose, is that it was the books that my parents read to me, that were read in my classrooms, that were read in my preschools, that made me, as a student coming from a two-mom family, never feel ostracized. I didn't realize, I was standing in my kitchen when I was 12 years old, and I was like, oh, a lot of people don't grow up in families with two moms. This isn't normal. It took me until I was 12 years old to realize that it wasn't normal to grow up in a two-mom family, and that is the magic of this community. I've never, on rare occasions, I would hear in middle school people would use the F word. There were always kids who came from families and didn't understand the implication of what the words meant, or whose families were very ignorant about the LGBTQ community and all of that. And so there were little instances of homophobia growing up, but for the most part, I was raised in an incredibly supportive community, and that was thanks to the prevalence of diversity in our libraries, in being in this library for 4 years and seeing the diversity of romances on the walls. Upside of Unrequited is right there. So I'm just standing here looking at these books that just gave me hope and inspired me throughout high school, and coming to realize that I was bisexual, and that's an identity that I'm both very proud of and has never been a very strong source of shame or discomfort or anything. And I feel blessed to have grown up in this community that has supported me, and it's through being raised with these books like And Tango Makes Two, and A Tale of Two Mommies, and Daddy's these were the books that I was raised of and I remember today because they made such a difference to me growing up, and knowing that I was accepted for who I am and for who my family is. And to hear that my community and this next generation of youth, who is even more already open-minded and accepting and inclusive than even my generation is, in what they're talking about and how they're being taught in school, to hear that they might not have this opportunity and have that taken away from them, and how it would impact youth individually as they grow up, coming from many diverse communities or from a less diverse community. It is absolutely heartbreaking to know that that would be taken away from them, and that is absolutely what I see this proposal to ban books doing, is taking away the opportunity to feel included, accepted, seen, and to learn about other people who live differently from yourself. So thank you.
Thank you.
We lost Mariah, right? Okay, so Liam, you want to
Barb, we got time for one more.
Liam Batches, Greenwood, ACSD employee, former leader of GSA at the middle school, and currently a special educator. Had the privilege today at 9 o'clock to hear our K1 and 2 teacher read a banned book to her class. It was the Lorax, which at one time was on the banned book list because people were afraid that we would become too concerned about the environment. This is another invitation for us to create a healthier environment by reading these banned books. The GSA that I led was also going through the pandemic, and when the 6th graders went through, it was not an easy time. You saw it in the newspaper, you felt it as a board. Those GSA kids needed to know that this was a safe place. And in some ways it wasn't. They needed allies. They found them, but they needed them because there were so many voices of hostility. It was hard. It would still bring me to tears. I had the privilege of seeing some of those kids on stage this weekend at ART, and wow, did they inspire me. I want to thank you, because this conversation just just touches my heart and builds my faith in this community, as you were a testament to. Another little glimpse of thank you was when I went to a second grade class 2 years ago at a small other elementary school. I won't say which one, but the student that was on my caseload was going by gender-neutral pronouns. Second grade, they knew they were a they for right now. And when I walked in just to see how this student was traveling, other students came up to me who hadn't met me before, said, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm Mr. Liam." "Oh, what are your pronouns?" The environment of that class knew that we had the freedom to define who we are. They were creating a more peaceful, inclusive, and healthier environment. They were the Lorax. Thank you.
So before we call another, we
We're at
have
12 minutes.
we're at 12 minutes. So what's the board? How many do we have on?
So we have 3 more in this room.
I can't imagine asking people who
Same.
stayed this
I know.
long.
Same. Okay.
I want to hear.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just checking in. Okay.
I am terrible with names. Will you please
I'm
tell me? Ari. Yay for 2 mom families. I'm a 2 mom.
Introduce
I'm one
yourself.
half, and I'm Paige Pearson. I'm from Shoreham. Thank you. Sorry, Barb. No, I'm not good with rules, Barb. And my partner and I have been together 32 years. We raised our son here, K through 12. And in 2nd grade, he came home from, well, no, he didn't come home from school because his teacher took care of it. One of his classmates, and he had the same, class for Shoreham, like, there was vacillated between 13 and 15 kids in his class for his 6 years there. 7 years, sorry. And one of the kids in his class said to him, "I know who your real mom is." And he didn't, like you, he was like, "Well, what does that mean?" So the teacher, and she's not there anymore, but bless her, she took Heather Has 2 Mommies, and she read it to the class. And she said, your family is also like a different type of family, and they're all different kinds of families that make up the world. And she took care of it, and the school did tell us about it, but we just thought, how great was that this book was there to show that they're all different kinds of people. And it's, I always feel safe in Vermont, that we're safe from what's going on. And when I read the Instagram post this weekend, I just burst into tears. Because I can't imagine Vermont being a place like other places where book bans are going on and people are having to deal with it. And so I appreciate, and I didn't know that the comments got moved, which is why I came in at 8:15 because I thought they started at 8:35. So I did read on Instagram that so many people were here and gave comments, and I want to thank everybody. I also want to thank the school board. My partner was chair of the Shoreham School Board when it existed, and on the board for I think 8 or 10 years. And you don't get enough accolades. And thank you. Hard work. And I think it's harder today than it was even 5 years ago. So, and the other thing I'm going to say is that my mother was indoctrinated into the Nazi youth as an elementary school student in Germany. And that started with book bans in the schools. We do not, as a society, want to do that. And fortunately, she was 15 when the war ended. And she's she's deceased now, but she was one of the most progressive people I know, but it can happen, and it happens when you start banning books. It doesn't happen when you give access to books to people and they get to choose. And if one book can help one kid, Jordan, like you were saying, find that they can be who they are, they don't have to fit in some mold, it is worth all of it. One person.
Thank you so much, Paige.
Sorry, no, I should have taken the pill.
These are the last two folks in the room. I was just encouraging them to move up a little bit.
Me
for
first
sound.
to this gentleman.
Go, yeah.
So my name's Steve Cash, I'm from Ripton. Put my back to you. Appreciate your comment. So one, I just wanna thank the school board for your efforts. Heard a lot tonight and I appreciate, you guys taking it all in and navigating what is a lot of issues from finance to kind of the whole world. So thank you for that. I was definitely impressed to hear, the policy committee's work tonight. The questions that Ripton community members do have haven't been answered. I know there's some conversation about that and, there's still some more questions and honestly, some of the language around that was kinda hard to hear or challenging to hear. I heard enrollment, GoFundMe, I heard recruitment. And I just kind of find that fantastic that Ripton is a part of this district, but yet there's language like that. And Ripton seems to be this very small planet that is a great distance away that yet can exert a tremendous gravitational pull at times. And so I'm just kind of confused how we're a part of the district, but yet language like that would be used. Because to use the language one board member used about finding open airplane seats. If Ripton School doesn't go next year or whatever happens, you'll be finding an airplane seat for my son in a different school. And so it just, some of that language is tough to hear. And I also thought about when the Commission on the Future of Education was here the other day, one of their guiding principles is equity does not mean equal or the same. And I think one challenge that you all face going forward, and we've heard, the diverse places that exist in this district, is you're either going to create a district and try to make everything the same, or you're going to create a district that thrives on some of the differences that exist. And you all are gonna have to figure out what you're interested in doing, so.
My name's Corey Hendrickson. This will be really short because this freaks me out speaking in public. But I thank you for doing the work that you guys are doing.
Corey, where do you live?
I just want to show my support for.
I want to know where you live.
I live in East Middlebury.
Okay.
Father to Mary Hogan Hawks. But I just want to be here in person to show my support for Mary Hogan teachers, staff, and the work they're doing to educate our children and support a diverse culture of inclusivity. Despite this, I also wanted to voice my strong opposition to book banning. Thank you.
And are there, I see there's some hands up.
Yeah.
So a couple were left up from before.
2 Middlebury residents and a Leicester resident who would like to speak.
Okay. So, let's start with the 2 Middlebury and then end with the Leicester. If everyone's okay?
Yep.
Sure.
Go ahead, Joanna.
Sorry, I'm a Ripton resident,
Oh,
so
sorry.
I was confused. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I guess I just want to say to everyone or anyone who may be worried about a kindergartner or a first grader reading a book like Julian is a Mermaid or any of these other books, don't be scared. these books, I have read most of them, and they are written with love, and they are really meant to help all of our kids feel loved and feel included and feel safe. And they're a benefit to kids, whatever their gender or sexuality may be or may turn out to be. Straight cisgendered kids benefit tremendously from these books as well, because these kinds of books help us understand that we're all in this together, and we can celebrate each other, and we can celebrate the things that are different about all of us, and we don't have to be in a little box of conformity. So I just want to say again, please don't be afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. And then?
Elio?
Yeah, hi all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, especially to the board for your leadership and care, and for everyone who spoke earlier. I would like to comment briefly on the book ban.
Could you say your name again?
Oh, sorry,
and where
I'm
you're
from Middlebury.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm a community member, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm also one of the creators of Middlebury Pride. I'm probably the face of some of the videos that you watched. And I also am really blessed to be a trans person. One of the reasons we created Middlebury Pride was because our queer and trans kids really need to be seen and celebrated in our community. I've led the group for queer and questioning youth at the Teen Center for the past 3 years, and can personally and professionally speak to the fact that positive queer representation and supportive communities are life-saving. If I would have been a lot less scared growing up if I had the type of representation that these picture books provided, and my community would have been a lot more able to support me and the other queer kids. I wanted to grow up to become a public high school educator, and I was in the process of earning my Vermont secondary health ed license, but 2 years ago I realized that my status as a trans person would be so politicized in the classroom that I wouldn't be an effective educator. I realized this because an elementary school teacher in my Illinois hometown was fired after a video of her classroom library was met with far-right vitriol and defamatory attacks. And it is the book bans like the ones that happened in my hometown school district, and like one that hopefully won't happen in this district, but they prevent students from the life-saving representation that we deserve, and they teach young adults like me that we're unwanted in our schools and communities. Mid-Pride, we're explicitly family-friendly to challenge the idea that queer people are dangerous. And supporting these books is another crucial way to demonstrate that queer and trans people are valued in our communities. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for what you do. I'm really glad that I get to be a part of this community. Thanks.
Thank you. And now Caitlin.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Caitlin Gildrian. I live in Leicester, but I am here on behalf of the Rutland Area NAACP, which covers Bennington, Rutland, and Addison County. I'm the vice president of that branch of the NAACP. And I just want to read the statement that we've prepared for this. The leadership of the Rutland Area NAACP is very troubled to learn about this attempted book ban in our school district. The NAACP strongly condemns any attempt to ban books, especially for elementary students, as it undermines students' fundamental right to access diverse ideas and perspectives. Throughout history, book bans have been used to silence marginalized voices, restrict intellectual freedom, and control the narratives surrounding race, identity, and history. These efforts are a direct attack on the educational system's mission to foster critical thinking, creativity, and an appreciation for diversity. The dangers of banning books are deeply rooted in history. During periods of censorship, whether in the Jim Crow South or under authoritarian regimes, Attempts to control what children and adults can read have always sought to erase uncomfortable truths, particularly those related to identity and equality. In doing so, book bans strip away the opportunity for young people to engage with stories that reflect both their own lives and the lived experience of others. This is especially concerning for children of marginalized identities, including students of color and those who are LGBTQIA+, who are more likely to benefit from seeing themselves represented in literature. Books allow young readers to navigate their emotions, expand their empathy, and imagine futures that transcend the limitations placed upon them by society. For elementary students, the power of representation in literature cannot be overstated. When children see themselves in the books they read, whether through characters who share their racial or cultural background or stories that speak to their lived experiences, they gain a sense of validation and belonging. These books can inspire children to dream bigger and believe in their potential. By banning such books, schools are denying children the opportunity to see their own humanity reflected in literature, and this deprivation can have lasting negative effects on their self-esteem, identity, and understanding of the world. The Rutland Area NAACP believes that every child deserves an education that embraces diverse voices and encourages the exploration of ideas that empower them to become informed, compassionate, and thoughtful citizens. We strongly urge the superintendent and the school board to deny this request and make clear their support for a diverse and welcoming learning environment for all students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for hanging in there for us. Thank you so much. At this point, is board reflections? Yes?
Public speaking is one of the most stressful things for most people. I'm so grateful to everyone on Zoom and in this room for standing up and speaking to us. What a gift for the board to get this much engagement and information and feedback from the community. And I'm really, really grateful for all of you, and this has been lovely. Thank you.
Any other public board reflections? Go ahead, Laura.
I want anybody who stood up and had an emotional reaction to know that, 2 years ago or so, I stood up and gave a public comment and also shook the whole time I did it. So, thank you so much for coming. And I was talking about something.
You were talking about A24.
Public engagement was like, please let us talk more. So, thank you everybody for coming and talking to us tonight.
And Chip.
Yeah, I was impressed by everybody that was so emotionally engaged. Having spoken at different times and had my voice crack or cry or do things like that, there's a certain embarrassment, but after you finish it, you feel better. And honestly, I appreciate everybody's thoughts. I think in some ways it's somewhat of a one-sided discussion in case, but we are expressing, the greater community, all these feelings, and so I appreciate you coming and stating it clearly that that's the case. We'll follow the procedures for sure, and we may have to sit as a judicial body at some point, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Already?